He had everything: a devoted wife, 4 children who worshipped him, and a home that looked more like a palace than a house. But one night he cast them out like yesterday's garbage. Years later he would return head bowed in shame, a stranger to the very children he created. This is the story of a man who lost it all to pride, and of a woman who, with quiet dignity, rebuilt her world from the ashes. I never want to see you in this house again. Not you, not any of your wretched children. The voice, a crack of thunder in the cavernous hall, belonged to Arthur Finch. It ricocheted off the marble walls of the Silverwood Creek mansion, a monument to a fortune built on ambition and ruthlessness. It was a cold, starless night in the north of England, but inside the grand foyer, with its velvet curtains and crystal chandeliers, the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Eleanor stood in stunned silence, her heart a leaden weight in her chest, while 4 pairs of small eyes stared up at her, wide with a terror they couldn't yet name. Arthur, please, these are your children, she whispered, her voice barely a breath. But he was no longer listening. To him, they were obstacles. Dead weight. With a glass of amber liquid in his hand, and his face a mask of cold contempt, he gestured to the colossal oak door. Get out. Now. Before I regret not doing this sooner. Chloe, at 13, was trembling, her arms wrapped tightly around her 7-year-old brother, Mason. 10-year-old Leo clenched his fists at his sides, his jaw set in a miniature version of his father's defiance. And little Lily, only 5, clung to her mother's coat, not understanding the words but feeling the violent current of hatred that flowed from the man she called Daddy. She just cried. Eleanor took a breath, not to argue, but to keep herself from shattering into a million pieces. She lifted her chin, scooped Lily into one arm, and with her other hand, she guided Chloe towards the door. On the other side, the city of Manchester hummed on with its life, oblivious, as if a family wasn't being torn apart from the inside out. Before we continue, I want to invite you to do something. If you've already felt a stirring in your chest, subscribe to this channel, turn on the notification bell and leave a like. Because this story, inspired by events that happen more often than we think, will touch the very core of your heart. And if you have ever witnessed someone pay a terrible price for their own injustice, write the word reckoning in the comments. Now let's continue. They walked for over an hour through the sleeping streets of the city center, carrying a single backpack containing a few changes of clothes and their birth certificates. No one offered help. No one asked if they were okay. No one seemed to care. Eleanor had no idea where to go. Her own parents were gone. The friends she once had vanished when Arthur's wealth became a wall between their worlds. There was no one left. Are we going to sleep on the street, Mum? Chloe asked, her voice raspy. Eleanor looked at her, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Of course not, my love. We're going somewhere safe. She was lying. She had no idea where they were going. Until, in the depths of her despair, a name surfaced from the past. Samuel Croft. An old friend, a love that might have been a man she had let go, but who had never, ever hurt her. They arrived at a quiet, cobbled street in Ashton, an older, industrial part of the city. The houses were modest, built from red brick. Under the dim glow of a single lamp post outside a workshop with a dark green door, Eleanor paused. The sign, carved from a single piece of oak, read Croft Restorations. Silence. She knocked again, a little harder this time. A deep, steady voice answered from within. "Who is it?" "It's me, Eleanor." The door opened slowly. Samuel Croft, his shirt flecked with sawdust and his face etched with surprise, said nothing at first. He just saw Eleanor, her face pale and drawn, and the 4 frightened children huddled behind her. "What happened?" he asked, his voice devoid of judgment. She couldn't answer. The tears she had held back for so long finally fell, silent and relentless. Chloe tightened her grip on her mother's hand. Lily was asleep in her arms. Sam simply stepped aside, holding the door open. "No questions. No conditions. My home is small," he said, his voice a low rumble, "but there's always room for those who need it." He brewed a pot of strong tea, pulled blankets from the back of a cupboard, and for the first time in years, Eleanor slept without the specter of shouting, of threats, of fear. But that night was more than a refuge. It was the beginning of something that not even Arthur, in his palatial prison of pride, could ever have imagined. A story of dignity, of resilience, and of a justice that was already on its way. The streets were deserted. The echo of their footsteps was a lonely sound on the cracked pavement of the main road as Eleanor forged ahead, her 4 children trailing behind her like a single, broken entity. Chloe carried the backpack with their meager belongings. Leo, his face a mask of grim determination, carried a half-asleep Mason on his back. No one was crying anymore. The tears had dried on their skin, like earth that stops begging for water when it resigns itself to a drought. Eleanor didn't speak a word. Her face was set, her lips a thin line, her gaze fixed on the horizon. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't stop. If she stopped, the children would understand there was nothing left. "Mum," Chloe said, her voice hoarse. "Are we ever going back?" Eleanor took a deep, shuddering breath. She tried to find something inside her that wasn't fear, but there was only a hollow silence. "No," she answered, barely moving her hand to stroke her daughter's hair, her eyes never leaving the path ahead. Chloe understood. There was no going back. Leo, only 10, glanced from side to side. He'd never seen his mother walk with her shoulders slumped like this. For the first time in his young life, he considered the possibility that adults could be broken too. "Where are we going to sleep, Mum?" he asked, his voice almost inaudible. Eleanor clenched her jaw. She wanted to tell them it would all be okay, that this was just temporary, that Arthur would come to his senses. But she couldn't lie to them anymore. They had heard it all. They knew their father didn't love them. Not anymore. They passed a closed bakery. The faint, stale smell of old bread drifted from under the metal shutters. Lily stirred in Eleanor's arms and began to whimper. Eleanor adjusted her grip, murmuring softly, while Mason, who was now awake and walking, clutched the hem of his mother's coat. The biting cold of the night was beginning to seep into their bones. A faint wind kicked up dust from the gutter. The sky was clear, but there were no stars, only a vast, empty darkness above them. In the distance, the lights of a more humble neighborhood began to glow. Eleanor recognized the streets of her own youth. Ashton. She had grown up here. Laughed here. Dreamed here long before she married Arthur. She stopped in front of a small workshop, its brick walls weathered by time, a dark green door with a simple brass handle. Her heart was pounding in her throat, not from fear of rejection but from shame. It had been more than 15 years since she'd seen Sam. He had been her friend, her confidant, her almost boyfriend. But she had chosen a different path. She had chosen Arthur. And now here she was, barefoot in spirit, her soul in tatters. She looked at her children. They were exhausted. They couldn't walk much further. She knocked on the door. Once. Twice. Nothing. She knocked again, this time with more force. "Who is it?" a man's voice replied, tinged with sleep and surprise. "It's me, Eleanor." Silence. Then the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps from the other side. A lock turned. The door swung open, and there he was. Samuel Croft, with the same quiet, steady gaze she remembered, though with more lines around his eyes and hands dusted with the fine powder of sanded wood. He wore old trousers and a simple, sleeveless t-shirt. His eyes widened when he saw her. Then his gaze dropped to the children, and he understood everything without a single word needing to be spoken. "What's happened?" he asked in that low, calm voice of his. Eleanor couldn't speak. She just looked down, clutching Lily tighter against her chest as the tears began to fall again. She didn't sob, she didn't explain, she just cried. Sam asked no more questions. He simply stepped aside. "Come in." Chloe was the first to enter. Leo and Mason followed her. Eleanor was the last to step over the threshold, as if she still doubted she deserved such a gesture. The door closed behind them, and for the first time that night, the sound wasn't one of punishment, but of protection. Inside the workshop, the air smelled of wood, old varnish, and peace. Sam gave them water. Then he found some blankets he kept stored in a large wooden chest. Eleanor watched him in silence, not knowing how to thank him, feeling as though any word would shatter the delicate grace of the moment. "My home is small," he said, laying the blankets on the floor of the main room, which doubled as his living space, "but it's enough for all of you." Lily fell asleep almost instantly. Mason snuggled up to Leo, who stared at the high, timbered ceiling with wide-open eyes. Chloe, however, didn't sleep. She sat with her back against the wall, watching Sam from the corner of her eye. She looked at him as if trying to understand why her mother had ever left a man like this. Eleanor sat down beside her daughter and stroked her hair. "Thank you for being so strong today," she whispered. Chloe didn't reply, just leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. Sam turned off the main light, but he didn't go to his own small room at the back. He sat on a wooden stool in the shadows, as if he knew that night wasn't for resting. It was for watching over. For holding a space, even in silence. Outside, the city slept on, but inside that small workshop, a new story had just begun. And what was about to unfold in that humble home held a weight that none of them could possibly have imagined. Dawn arrived without a sound. The early morning chill gave way to a gentle warmth that drifted through the half-open window of Sam's workshop. Outside, the first rays of sun illuminated the slate roofs and cracked facades of the neighboring houses. Inside, in the main room, the silence was thick, almost sacred. The four children were still asleep on the floor, wrapped in the borrowed blankets. Eleanor, on the other hand, hadn't slept a wink. She sat in a corner, her back against the wall, watching them breathe. One by one, she listened to their soft snores, the involuntary twitches of their exhausted bodies. She felt hollowed out, as if the previous night had drained her of her very soul. Sam appeared with 2 earthenware mugs in his hands. He offered one to Eleanor. She accepted it with a gesture of very gratitude. Strong black coffee. She recognized the aroma. "You didn't sleep at all, did you?" he asked, without a trace of reproach in his voice. "I couldn't," she replied. "None of this feels real." Sam sat down on a wooden stool opposite her. "You are safe here, Eleanor. You and the children. No one will touch you." She nodded silently, but her gaze remained distant. It was hard for her to accept this new reality. She had gone from a marble dining room to a concrete floor, from a powerful husband to a shared blanket. But she didn't complain. She felt that, even in its pain, this transition brought something the mansion never had: peace. Several minutes passed without a word. Only the clatter of dishes from a neighbor's kitchen broke the stillness. "Do you remember," Sam said suddenly, a nostalgic smile touching his lips, "that time you wanted to go to art school in London? You said you wanted to learn sculpture." Eleanor was taken aback. No one had remembered that dream in years. "I was just being silly," she replied. "It didn't seem silly. You had that look in your eyes. The look of someone who wants more." She glanced down. That look had faded a long time ago. One of the children stirred. It was Leo, who sat up, rubbing his eyes. The first thing he saw was Sam, sitting there. He hesitated for a moment, not sure whether to feel comfortable or ashamed. Sam smiled at him. "Morning, champ. Sleep well?" Leo nodded slowly. Then he looked around. He didn't ask where they were. He understood, without fully understanding, that this place was either temporary or the beginning of something new. "Is there any toast?" he asked quietly. Sam stood up without a word, went to a small kitchenette in the corner, took out a loaf of bread he'd bought the day before, and returned with 4 slices of toast and a jar of jam. It wasn't enough for everyone to have a full breakfast, but Eleanor broke each piece in half. It was how she would teach them that even when you have little, you can always share what you have. "Here you go, my loves. Eat slowly," she said. Mason woke up in Chloe's arms. He looked around, confused, as if still expecting to see the plush carpets of his old playroom. But his eyes settled on the peeling paint of the workshop walls and the water-stained ceiling, and he understood they weren't there anymore. He hugged his sister tightly, without a word. Sam observed it all without interfering. He knew he couldn't fix their past, but he could be present for them now. Sometimes silence is more restorative than any word. When everyone had finished eating, Sam showed them a small, empty room at the back of the workshop. "It's just storage," he said, "but we can move this old wardrobe, bring in another mattress. It's not much, but you can have this room. For some privacy." Eleanor looked at him with a gratitude so profound it felt like an ache in her chest. She was not accustomed to such selfless generosity. "Thank you, Sam. Really, thank you." He shook his head. "You don't have to thank me for anything. Just don't disappear again." She swallowed hard. It wasn't the time to talk about the past, but that phrase left something lodged in her heart. Chloe, who had been listening from the doorway, took a step forward. "Did you know our mum from before?" Sam approached her slowly. "Yes. A long time before any of you were born. Then why weren't you together? Chloe asked, not with malice, but with genuine curiosity. Eleanor answered before he could. Because sometimes life takes you down paths you don't understand until it's far too late. Chloe looked down, processing so many new, heavy truths at once. The morning passed slowly, but with a calmness none of them had felt in years. The children began to explore the workshop, touching the old tools, sitting on the porch, playing with wood shavings as if they were the finest toys. And all the while, Eleanor watched them silently, her heart full of fear, but also with a tiny spark of something she hadn't felt in a long, long time. Something that felt like hope. But just as it seemed the day might close in peace, a sharp rap on the front door shattered the moment. Sam went to see who it was. A thin woman in a crisp suit, holding a briefcase, looked at him sternly. "I'm looking for a Mrs. Eleanor Vance." "Yes," Sam replied, his voice guarded. The woman held out a document. "She's been served. She's required in court on Monday. There's a lawsuit filed against her." Eleanor, hearing her name, came to the door. She took the document with trembling hands and opened it. Her face contorted as she read the heading. Claim for corporate fraud. Claimant Arthur Finch. Peace never lasts long. And this time, the blow wasn't just emotional. It was legal. And it came straight from the man who had already taken everything from her. Eleanor held the folder with hands that shook so violently she could barely read the words. It wasn't just a document, it was a dagger inscribed in black ink. The words corporate fraud and gross negligence left no room for doubt, and the signature at the bottom, Arthur Finch, confirmed that no matter how low the man had fallen, his capacity for cruelty remained perfectly intact. Sam said nothing. He just watched her, his brow furrowed, his fists clenched at his sides. He knew this might happen. He knew what kind of man Arthur was, but he hadn't imagined he would stoop this far, this fast. "What does it say?" Chloe asked from the doorway, her eyes fixed on her mother's every movement. Eleanor took a long moment to respond. She closed the folder carefully, as if afraid the letters would leap off the page and strike her in the face. "It's nothing, sweetheart. It's just grown-up business," she said, trying to keep her voice from breaking. Chloe didn't press, but the tension was a physical presence in her small body. She went to her brothers and led them back into the room. Leo followed without a word. Lily, however, turned to look at her mother before disappearing, as if something inside her knew that the woman who had cared for her since birth was on the verge of collapsing. Once inside the main workshop, Eleanor sunk onto a wooden chair. She stared at the closed folder. Her stomach was in knots, and a tight band was squeezing her chest. She couldn't understand how Arthur could continue to hurt her after leaving her on the street. Wasn't losing her home, her clothes, her dignity punishment enough? "I'll speak to a lawyer," Sam said, breaking the silence. "We can't just let this happen." "And what will we pay him with?" she answered, her voice rising for the first time before she corrected herself. "Sorry. I'm not angry with you." Sam sat down opposite her. He took her hands in his grip firm but not invasive. "Let me help you. I don't want you to face this alone." She nodded, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. Her pride had no place in her life anymore. She was learning the hard way that accepting help wasn't giving up, it was surviving. The hours of that afternoon passed with agonizing slowness. Eleanor barely ate. She shut herself in the room with the children, fingering a calm she didn't feel, but inside, everything was a raging stone. Sam, for his part, retreated to his workshop, the sound of his sanding and planning echoing his own helplessness. As dusk fell, they prepared a simple meal of beans and rice. It was all they had. They ate in silence. Only Mason, the youngest, smiled from time to time, not fully grasping the drama unfolding around him. That night, before sleeping, Eleanor pulled out a small box she kept at the bottom of her backpack. Inside were a few old photographs, a broken rosary, and an unopened letter. It was from her own mother, written just before she died. She had never read it. Out of fear, out of pain, out of everything she hadn't wanted to face at the time. She opened it. "My daughter," it read, "if you ever feel you can't go on, remember that surviving isn't about living with the crumbs. It's about learning how to bake them into bread." Eleanor let the letter fall and cried silently. She didn't want the children to hear her. She didn't want Sam to see her. But the sobs came on their own, as if her soul was purging itself of so much accumulated injustice. The next day, Sam left early. He went to see an old acquaintance who worked as a paralegal in a small law firm in the city center. He didn't have money for expensive lawyers, but he hoped to find at least some guidance. Meanwhile, at the workshop, Eleanor tried to create a sense of normalcy. She washed their clothes by hand, hanging them on a line in the small backyard, and braided Lily's hair into tight plaits. Chloe watched her from the kitchen doorway. She was sitting with her arms crossed and a deep frown on her face. "Why is he doing this?" she asked suddenly. "Wasn't it enough to throw us out?" Eleanor stopped hanging a blanket. She looked at her daughter with an old pain, with a resignation she no longer tried to hide. "Your father doesn't know who he is anymore. And sometimes, when a person is completely lost, they cause damage just so they don't have to feel so empty." Chloe nodded slowly, but the anger in her eyes didn't disappear. Something in her had changed, something not visible at first glance, but that would soon begin to grow. Sam returned that afternoon with encouraging news. The lawyer, a young man named David Chain, had agreed to look at the case without charging an initial fee. He said the documents presented by Arthur's team had inconsistencies and that he needed to investigate further. "The important thing now," David had said when he came by later that afternoon to speak with Eleanor, "is that you are not alone. We will defend you." Eleanor felt a wave of relief. For the first time in days, she felt she had a shield. A small one, yes, but more solid than any promise Arthur had ever made. However, David was clear. This could escalate. It wouldn't be surprising if he tries to use more documents against you. We have to be prepared. Eleanor nodded, feeling a familiar ache in her stomach. She knew Arthur was capable of many things, but she didn't know just how far he would be willing to go. That night, while everyone else was asleep, Eleanor opened a bag with the few clothes they'd managed to save. Among them, she found something she didn't remember packing, a small, wooden memory box with her initials carved on the lid. When she opened it, she discovered old bank statements and a handwritten note from Arthur. What she read made her legs tremble. he hadn't just unjustly accused her. He had been using her name to hide something far more serious. Something that, if it came to light, could not only destroy him but drag her down to the very bottom with him. The box was old, with rusted hinges and a layer of dust that spoke of years untouched. Eleanor had found it tucked among the blankets at the bottom of the one backpack she'd managed to save before leaving the mansion. When she opened it, she wasn't expecting anything important, perhaps some worthless trinkets or sentimental notes, but what she found was far worse. There were several official-looking documents in her name, investment contracts, tax filings, and tucked among them, a handwritten memo from Arthur. It wasn't a farewell letter or an explanation. It was a confession disguised as instructions, a damning summary that detailed how to move specific sums of money into offshore accounts using her name, her supposed signature, her credibility as his wife. A cold dread washed over Eleanor. She slammed the box shut. She knew she couldn't tell the children, nor could she tell Sam, at least not yet. The information was too dangerous. It could not only sink her, but also put the very people helping her at risk. She hid the box under her makeshift mattress and remained silent, holding Mason close as he slept beside her. The boy, blissfully unaware, sought his mother's warmth and curled into her side as if his innocence could shield her from the world. The next morning, Eleanor woke before sunrise. She splashed her face with cold water from a basin and stared at her reflection in the grimy glass of the workshop window. She barely recognized herself. The well-dressed, perfectly made-up, elegant woman was gone. What remained was a mother in wrinkled clothes, her soul weary, but her eyes resolute. She decided she had to find work. She couldn't depend on anyone, not even Sam. Even though he had given her a roof over her head, even though her children had already started to see him as part of their family, she felt she had to stand on her own 2 feet. For her dignity. Out of necessity. She left Chloe in charge of her younger siblings and walked the streets of Ashton. She knocked on doors, asked in pubs, in bakeries, in food stalls. She received a dozen no's, a handful of suspicious glares, and the occasional sneer, but she didn't stop. Finally, in a small diner near the local market, a woman named Mrs. Gable listened to her patiently. "Do you know how to wash dishes?" she asked. Quietly, and without breaking anything, Eleanor replied. "Then come back tomorrow at 6. The pay isn't much, but it's something." Eleanor nodded gratefully. She didn't ask how much. The important thing was having a place to start. That afternoon, when she returned to the workshop, she found Sam teaching Leo how to use an old hand drill. Lily and Mason were playing with sawdust, drawing pictures on the floor. Chloe was sitting on the porch reading a schoolbook, but when she saw her mother enter, she closed it and came over immediately. "Did you get anything?" "Yes, my love. I start tomorrow." Chloe smiled. It wasn't a wide smile, but it was genuine. It was the first piece of good news in days. "And how were your siblings?" "Good. Sam looked after us. He made us toys from wood scraps." She paused. "And you?" Chloe lowered her gaze. "Mum, it's not easy seeing them so happy with so little. And to think that before we had everything." Eleanor knelt down and took her daughter's face in her hands. "We had a lot of things before, Chloe, but not everything. Now, we have what's important." Chloe didn't reply, but the hug they shared said more than any words could. Sam approached, wiping his hands on a rag. I'm making coffee. Want some? Yes, please. I need it today. While Sam boiled the water, Eleanor sat with him in the small kitchenette. She hesitated for a few seconds, but then she took the plunge. I found something among my things. Some papers documents where Arthur used my name to move money. Sam looked at her, his eyes wide. Are you sure? I don't fully understand it, but it has my signature on forms I don't remember ever signing. And a note written by him that makes me look like an accomplice. And has David seen this? I don't want to show him. I'm scared. What if it just makes everything worse? Sam leaned towards her, his voice firm. Worse is hiding it and having it discovered when we are not prepared. We have to face it. You are not alone, Eleanor. She nodded, clutching her mug. That night, before falling asleep, Leo approached Sam with a clumsily cut piece of wood. Can you teach me how to make things like you do? He asked, pointing to a small carved figure of a horse that Sam had been working on. Sam smiled and sat down beside him. Of course. But you have to learn to respect the tools. Not to rush. Wood, like life, breaks if you force it. Leo nodded as if he had just heard a great truth. Meanwhile, Chloe went to her room and pulled out a notebook she had been writing in secretly. She jotted down a thought that had been circling her mind all day as she watched her siblings. If I ever have children, I'll tell them their grandfather was a man who had it all and didn't know how to keep any of it. She closed the notebook and put it under her pillow. And at that exact moment, someone knocked on the front door with 3 hard, decisive raps. It was nearly 10 o'clock at night. Too late for a casual visit. Too precise to be a coincidence. The door shuddered with 3 sharp knocks. They weren't hurried, nor were they polite. They were dry, hard, as if their purpose wasn't to announce a visit, but to demand something that was believed to be owed. Sam crossed the room with cautious steps. Eleanor emerged from the back room, her heart pounding. Chloe peeked out from the kitchen area, holding Leo back with one hand to stop him from moving forward. When they opened the door, they saw a man in a dark suit and a crisp white shirt, holding a leather briefcase. His face was tense, his eyes unmoving. He seemed to know exactly what he had come for. Good evening. I'm looking for Mr. Arthur Finch. This address appeared as his last known residence on a legal filing, he said, without asking who Sam was. He doesn't live here, Sam replied curtly. The man consulted a sheet of paper and raised an eyebrow. Then you must be Mrs. Eleanor Vance? Sam didn't answer immediately. Eleanor stepped forward. I am. The man pulled out a sealed envelope with a red sticker. A court summons. Your presence is required in 3 days. There is new evidence against you. Eleanor took the envelope without a word. The man turned and walked away without a goodbye. He disappeared into the darkness as if he had no face, as if he were just another instrument of a blind justice that so often punishes those who happen to be on the wrong side of power. Inside, Sam closed the door carefully. I don't want the children to know anything, Eleanor said in a small voice. This isn't just a setback anymore. This is a war. Eleanor nodded, feeling a storm gathering inside her. The fear was becoming more palpable, but something else was beginning to stir as well. A restrained fury. A need to stop being trampled on. While this was happening in the gritty streets of Ashton, several miles away, in a lavish restaurant in the affluent heart of Manchester, Arthur was raising a glass with Isabella. Surrounded by crystal, warm light, and soft music, he smiled that smile he reserved for moments when he felt he had everything under control. Isabella was dressed in red, her lips painted, her laugh effortless. "Are you sure everything is legally in her name?" she asked, swirling her wine glass between her fingers. "Absolutely," Arthur said. "She's legally responsible for everything she signed. She won't even know what hit her." Isabella looked at him with feigned admiration. Inwardly, her thoughts were elsewhere. "He's brilliant but so arrogant," she whispered more to herself than to him. Arthur ordered another bottle. He was euphoric. His new partnership, with a group of investors Isabella had introduced him to, seemed solid. Isabella, ever so clever, had convinced him to transfer his most valuable shares into a trust that, according to her, would put everything in his name for protection. But Arthur, blinded by his own ego, hadn't read a word of the fine print. He signed whatever Isabella put in front of him. He couldn't imagine she would ever betray him. After all, he'd left his family for her. "You know," Arthur said with a laugh, "I don't understand how some men let themselves be ruined by a woman." Isabella smiled. The waiter left the bottle on the table. "I agree," she replied, her expression as cold as frost. That night, while Arthur toasted with French wine, Sam was working in his workshop with Leo. The boy was sanding a piece of wood aggressively, frustrated that it wasn't perfectly smooth. "Don't get angry with it," Sam told him. "Wood doesn't bend to force, but to patience." Leo looked at him, panting. "And what if I don't have any patience? Then the wood will break. And so will you." Leo's shoulders slumped. Sam ruffled his hair and took the sandpaper from him. "I've broken many things by not waiting," he said in a low voice. Leo didn't fully understand, but something in that sentence stuck with him. Eleanor, for her part, had stored the new summons with the other papers she'd found in the box. She couldn't sleep. She thought about the trial, about her children, about the diner where she had to show up before sunrise every day. But most of all, she thought about something more sinister. What if Arthur fell and dragged everyone down with him? Lily woke in her sleep and asked for water. Eleanor got up, gave her a glass, and rocked her back to sleep. The child returned to her dreams with a smile. She stayed there, just watching her. She was so small, so vulnerable, yet she was already carrying the weight of a story she didn't even understand. "I won't fail you," she whispered. At dawn, while the neighborhood was just starting to stir, Isabella opened her phone and confirmed an international transfer. Millions of pounds, into an account in her name, were cleared from what was left of Arthur's empire. And in a hotel across town, a man who once owned everything slept peacefully, never imagining that the betrayal he had orchestrated was about to be dwarfed by one of a much higher caliber. And the worst part was, his fall had barely even begun. What was coming would leave him utterly alone, with no way back. The day began with a pale sun that offered no warmth. Arthur woke up in his hotel bed in a smart part of the city, his shirt wrinkled, his mouth dry and a vague sense of victory still clinging to him. The night before, he had signed the new investment deal with the group of businessmen Isabella had presented to him. He couldn't remember how many glasses of champagne he'd had, nor which papers he had signed. He only remembered her smile, that proud smile of someone who feels they are still winning the game. He got up without hurry, fastened his gold watch, the only luxury he had left, and dialed Isabella's number. He called once. Twice. Nothing. Frowning, he showered, went down to the lobby, and ordered breakfast with an air of authority. But the waiter served him without any haste. He was no longer Mr. Finch, the man the staff at the country club greeted with fawning respect. He was just another guest, and he was beginning to notice. By noon, he tried to locate Isabella again. He called her mobile, then her office, then her assistant. Every call went to voicemail or was met with a flat, unhelpful response. He felt a knot forming in his stomach. The security he had associated with signing documents and toasting with champagne began to melt through his fingers. He went back to his room and opened his briefcase. Among the papers, he found the new investment contract. He began to read it carefully for the first time. The title was different. The clauses were different. And his name didn't appear as the owner of anything, only as a guarantor. The trust was in Isabella's name, and a shell company registered in an offshore haven. Sweat trickled down his back. His heart hammered against his ribs. For the first time in years, Arthur felt fear. Not anger, not annoyance. Pure cold fear. He called his bank. His main account no longer existed. "I'm sorry, Mr. Finch," the executive's voice said. "Your account was closed by a notarized order 3 days ago." "What are you talking about?" Arthur screamed. "The instructions were signed by you, sir. We have the documentation." He hung up. His thoughts were a frantic storm. He left the room without closing the door and took a taxi to the building where Isabella lived. The doorman looked at him sideways. "The lady left, sir," he said. "Cleared out yesterday with her suitcases." "Where did she go?" "She left no forwarding address." He went up to her apartment. He banged on the door. No one answered. He forced it open. It was empty. The closets were bare. The drawers were open. All that was left was a folded note on the kitchen counter. "You taught me to secure my own future. I was just following your example. Goodbye." Arthur actually fell to his knees, as if the floor had given way beneath him. He had been stripped of everything. Again? But this time, it wasn't by his own pride. It was by his own naivety. His mobile vibrated. It was a message from the bank. His mortgage application had been rejected due to an insufficient financial history. He left the apartment with no destination in mind. He walked the streets of Manchester without knowing where to go. The gold watch on his wrist now seemed like a mockery. He sold it that afternoon in a pawn shop for a quarter of its value. He ate a kebab from a street vendor. Not for pleasure but out of need. He didn't know how long he would last with the little cash he had left. Night fell, and he found himself sitting on a park bench. He watched children playing, couples laughing, street vendors pushing their carts, people he had never considered his equals, and who were now his reflection. At the same time, in Ashton, Eleanor was serving dinner to her children. Rice, eggs, and beans. Chloe passed around glasses of juice. Leo was making Lily laugh about something that happened at school. Mason was proudly showing off a gold star his teacher had given him for reading aloud clearly. "Do you think we can go to the zoo again someday?" Leo asked. "Of course," Eleanor said. "Maybe not soon, but we will." Sam watched her from the end of the table. Even with everything they had lost, that home felt full, filled with things money could never buy. That same night, Arthur returned to his hotel. The manager was waiting for him at the reception desk. "I am sorry, sir. Your reservation has expired, and we are not authorized to extend it. Your account is overdue. I'll sort it tomorrow. I'll speak to my lawyer." "There is no margin, sir. You need to vacate the room now." Arthur went upstairs, grabbed his briefcase and a few shirts, and came back down. No one helped him. No one held the door. He carried his own suitcase for the first time in years. And as he walked down the Grand Avenue, he felt the world collapsing on top of him. He sat down in a closed shop doorway, made himself as comfortable as he could on a piece of cardboard, and closed his eyes. He didn't cry, but something inside him shattered. It wasn't just the bankruptcy, it was the realization that all this time, he had built nothing real. Not one relationship, not one friendship, not one family member that would come looking for him. And just as he closed his eyes to sleep, a voice pulled him from his misery. "Mr. Finch?" Arthur opened his eyes slowly. It was someone he never expected to see in these circumstances. Someone who knew him all too well, and whose presence would force him to confront the truth he had spent years avoiding. Arthur couldn't react immediately. The voice that had called his name seemed to rise from the abyss of his own ruin, an echo from a past he thought he had buried. He lifted his gaze with an effort, and his eyes, now accustomed to dirt and despair, took a few seconds to focus on the face before him. It was George Miles, his former personal accountant, the same man who for over a decade had managed his company's books, who knew every figure, every transaction, every transfer. A man of few words, but with a precise memory. And there he was, standing before him with a shopping bag in one hand and a stern look on his face. "What happened to you, Arthur?" he asked, without sarcasm or mockery, but also without pity. Arthur tried to compose himself. He managed a half-hearted attempt. "It's none of your business," he said, his voice hoarse with wounded pride. "I worked for you for 15 years, George replied. "Not out of pity, but because I believed in what you were building. Until you started doing what you did." Arthur frowned, irritated. "Are you here to lecture me, too?" George shook his head. He pulled a thermos from his bag and held it out. "No. I came to bring you coffee. It's getting cold." Arthur hesitated, but finally accepted. He drank it in silence as the city continued to swirl around him, indifferent to his fall. "I saw you in the papers last week," George continued. "The article spoke of a fraudulent trust. They said your signature was on all the documents, but you were no longer listed as a beneficiary of anything." Arthur gritted his teeth. The shame burned inside him. "Isabella, she played me." George watched him in silence for a few seconds. Then he sat down beside him on the bench. I'm not going to tell you that you deserved it. But you built this fall yourself, stone by stone. Did you come to humiliate me or to help me? To tell you the truth, George replied. And to warn you. There's an open investigation. The Treasury, the tax authorities, and the criminal court in Glasgow. If you don't get ahead of this, you'll end up in prison, not on this bench, which is a lot more comfortable by comparison. Arthur swallowed, feeling a lump in his throat. He had crossed every line, believing he would never be caught. But the past always collects its debts, and his was written in zeros. I have nowhere to go, he whispered for the first time, his eyes vacant. I can't help you with more than a coffee, George said, standing up. But I'll tell you something. If you have any shred of decency left, find it. Because justice is coming, and it's not coming alone. He left a crumpled piece of paper in his hand. It was the name and address of a pro bono defense lawyer. Nothing more, nothing less. And then he was gone. Arthur was alone again, but this time with a new weight on his shoulders. Not hunger, not cold, but conscience. And that hurt more than anything else. In Ashton, on the other side of the city, Chloe walked with her head down through the corridors of her new secondary school. From the first day, some of her classmates had pointed at her for her second-hand clothes, her old shoes, her patched-up backpack. Did you crawl out of a bin or something? One of them had said as she passed. Chloe didn't respond. She just clutched her notebook to her chest and walked faster. She knew she couldn't fight them, not with words. Her only weapon was her own quiet resilience. That day, in her English class, the teacher asked for a volunteer to read a passage from a book aloud. No one raised their hand. Chloe did. She read flawlessly, with intonation, with confidence. At the end, the teacher looked at her, surprised. Very good, Chloe. That's how it's done. Her classmates said nothing, but one of them, the same one who had mocked her earlier, mumbled under his breath, "She doesn't sound so bad." Chloe heard, but this time, she didn't lower her head. When she got home, she found Sam in the yard, cutting wood. Leo was with him, using a piece of sandpaper. "How was school?" Sam asked without stopping his work. "Good," Chloe said. "I did well." Eleanor came out with a bucket of wet laundry. The exhaustion was visible in the slump of her back, but seeing her daughter's expression, she smiled. "You didn't cry today." "No, and I didn't hide, either." Eleanor went to her and kissed her forehead. That small but deeply meaningful gesture was more powerful than any school prize. That night, while the children slept, Eleanor sat down to review the papers once again. She was determined to face everything. She couldn't run anymore, but she knew that to do so, she would have to get to the bottom of what Arthur had been hiding for years. Sam spoke from the main room. "Do you remember if Arthur ever asked you to sign anything strange? Something you couldn't explain?" Sam put his chisel down on the workbench and looked at her seriously. It took her a few seconds to respond. "Yes. Once. He asked me to sign as a witness on a consultancy contract. He told me it was to avoid an audit." "Did you read it?" "No. I trusted him. And I was pregnant with Mason. I didn't want any more stress." Eleanor closed her eyes tightly. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to click into place. Everything she had lived through as a protected wife during their marriage had, in fact, been a web of lies woven with her name. "I have to talk to David," she said. "Tomorrow? We can't wait any longer." Sam nodded, but before returning to his work, he asked her in a low voice, "Are you ready to find out what Arthur really did?" Eleanor didn't answer with words. She just said, "I'm not afraid anymore." And the next day, when they arrived at the lawyer's office, they found news they weren't expecting. David had received an urgent notification. A court order. And it wasn't just Eleanor who was implicated anymore. Now, someone else was being called to testify. And that someone was Sam. David stared at the legal folder. He said nothing, but his hand kept tracing the edges of the document. Eleanor, sitting across from his desk, watched him with a mixture of tension and exhaustion. Sam, standing by the window, couldn't keep still. His jaw was tight, and the rigidity in his shoulders betrayed his inner turmoil. "Are you absolutely sure you never signed anything else, Sam?" David asked without taking his eyes off the paper. "Yes. Just that one contract. Years ago. Arthur asked me to sign as a witness for some consultancy work. He told me it was just to cover a tax procedure." "Did you read it?" "No. I trusted him. He was my friend back then, and I don't know anything about law." David sighed, closed the folder, and placed it on the desk with a careful thud, as if it weighed more than it looked. That document was used to justify the creation of a front company in Glasgow. That company received funds from an enterprise linked to illegal transactions. And what's more subtle is that you appear as the technical approver of the project. Sam felt a void open in his stomach. Eleanor brought a hand to her mouth. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means that if we don't clarify the circumstances under which he signed that document, Sam could be implicated as an accomplice. Not just a witness, but as part of the fraudulent act." A thick, dark silence fell over the room. Sam walked to the desk and sat down opposite the lawyer. For the first time in a long while, he bowed his head. "I didn't want to cause trouble," he said, his voice low. "I was just helping a friend and taking care of a family that was falling apart in my hands." Eleanor placed her hand over his. Her gaze was firm but held no blame. "You are not alone in this," she told him. "We'll get through it together." David nodded. "Then we have to prepare. The court in Glasgow is requesting his appearance. We'll have to go there within the week." "And the children?" Eleanor asked. "They can stay with me," Chloe answered. She had been listening to everything from the doorway. Her expression was serious, mature. She was no longer the frightened little girl from weeks ago. David handed them a sheet of legal instructions. Before saying goodbye, he looked at Sam intently. "The most important thing is that you tell the whole truth, even if it hurts." The journey home was silent. Eleanor stared out the window of the car while Sam kept his hands clasped in his lap. Chloe sat in the back with her headphones on, though she wasn't listening to music. She just needed the space. When they got home, the younger children came out to greet them. Leo ran to hug the man who was becoming the father he admired. Mason asked if they had brought sweets. No one understood that a new, dark chapter was looming. That night, while everyone slept, Sam shut himself in his small workshop, lit a lamp, and pulled out a box he kept on a high shelf. Inside were old papers, notes, receipts, and among them, a copy of the contract he had signed for Arthur. He read it from beginning to end for the very first time. His name was there, in his firm handwriting, in blue ink, as if at that moment he had felt no fear in putting it there. But it was the addendum at the end that shocked him most. A supplementary page he had never seen, where a clause appeared that linked him as jointly responsible for the technical consultancy in the investment process. Sam closed his eyes. He didn't understand the legal terms, but the word responsible weighed on him like a chain. Eleanor entered without making a sound. "Are you okay?" "No. But I have to be. For you. For them." She sat down beside him, took the paper from his hands, and folded it carefully. "Then let's start by not hiding anything else." "I failed you," he said. "If you had failed me, you would have left. But you are still here." They hugged, not as a couple, not as lovers. They hugged like two survivors who understand that true love is often forged in the midst of battle. The next day, while Sam was showing Leo how to hammer a nail without splitting the wood, Arthur was walking aimlessly through the center of Manchester. He was still wearing the same clothes from 2 days ago. His hair was matted, his face gaunt. On a bench, he pulled out the paper George had given him. The address of the pro bono lawyer. He was afraid to go, but he had no other options. As he was folding it to put it away, a voice snapped him out of his thoughts. "Mr. Finch. What a surprise to find you here." Arthur looked up. Standing before him was a man he had met in his glory days, a Mr. Gavez, a partner in one of the ventures that had brought him the most profit and the most trouble. "What do you want?" Arthur said, without cheer. "I came to tell you something. Out of courtesy, let's say." "What?" "The case has gotten more serious. There's a seizure order on all your assets and accounts, and an internal audit has been initiated by the prosecutor's office." "This is serious, Arthur." "Who started it?" Gavez smiled. "Eleanor. Through her lawyer." Arthur went pale. "She couldn't have. She doesn't have the resources for that." "She doesn't? But it seems someone is backing her. And they're digging deep." "What do you mean?" "If I were you, I'd present myself before you are left with nothing but the street." Arthur remained still. For the first time, he felt he had run out of moves. There was nowhere left to hide. But what he didn't know was that his greatest humiliation was yet to come. Because very soon, the only place he might find shelter would be at the very door of the home he had once destroyed. Arthur walked for over an hour after his encounter with Gavez. The man's words hammered at his skull. It wasn't just the announcement of an investigation, it was the end of the silence that had served as his shield for so many years. Night fell quickly. He stopped in front of a simple terraced house in a working-class neighborhood. He recognized it. It had belonged to a reliable supplier many years ago. The business was gone now, it was a house with rooms for rent. He rang the bell with a sense of resignation. A woman in a dressing gown and slippers opened the door. "Looking for a room?" she asked unkindly. "Yes. Whatever you have. I have no references, but I can pay for a week." The woman scanned him from head to toe. She hesitated. £50 a night, and you pay in advance. Arthur handed over the last notes he had left. She led him to a room with a single bed, an old fan, and a window without curtains. He sat on the mattress and bowed his head. He didn't eat dinner that night. He had no energy, no appetite. He just thought about when it had all gone so wrong. When he had stopped seeing Eleanor as a partner. When he had turned his children into obstacles. When he had allowed Isabella to play with his company as if it were a chessboard. But what hurt the most was remembering the exact day he had thrown his family out of the house. Not out of necessity, not because of a betrayal. He had done it out of pure pride, because he believed he could start over without them. And now, surrounded by cracked walls, with only a few wrinkled shirts to his name, he understood the crushing weight of his mistake. The next day, in Ashton, David arrived at Eleanor's home with news. He had managed to access a hidden investigation file that confirmed what they had feared. Arthur hadn't just used Eleanor's name to move money through front companies, he had also implicated Sam as part of a second contract with forged documents that expanded his supposed liability. "This is real," David said firmly. "They're going to try to use the connection between you to file a joint indictment." Eleanor looked at him coldly. "And do we have proof that Sam didn't sign that second part?" David pulled out an envelope. His signature was forged. "I know because a handwriting expert has already analyzed it. But what's most important is what we discovered in this second document." Eleanor took the paper and read it in silence. When she got to the last paragraph, her expression changed. "Here another name appears. We haven't seen this before." David nodded. "It's the name of a middleman Arthur used several times. And what no one knew is that this man is in prison and has requested to make a statement in exchange for a reduced sentence." Sam entered the room at that exact moment with Lily in his arms. "Is something wrong?" David looked him straight in the eye. "There's a man who can clear your name. But he could also sink Arthur for good." Sam swallowed hard. "And what do we have to do?" "Go to Glasgow. He wants to talk in person." The trip was scheduled for the next day. Eleanor and Sam left by coach at dawn. They left the children with a trusted neighbor, and Chloe promised to look after everyone. The journey was silent. Both had something in their eyes that wasn't spoken in words, fear of what they were about to hear. When they arrived at the Glasgow prison, they were met by a public defender and a guard. "The prisoner's name is Leo Martinez," the guard said. "He's convicted of fraud and money laundering, but he worked closely with Mr. Finch 6 years ago. He has evidence that implicates more people, but he only wants to speak with the two of you." Eleanor looked at Sam. He nodded. They entered the visiting room. Leo Martinez was already waiting for them, a man with a thin, angular face, graying hair, and deeply tired eyes. He wore a grey prison uniform and held a notebook in his hands. "Thank you for coming," he said flatly. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me." "What do you know about Arthur?" Sam asked bluntly. "Everything. I assembled the contracts. I designed the shell companies. I forged the signatures. And yes, yours, Sam, was on 2 of them. But it was Arthur who asked me to." Eleanor clenched her fists. And my name, he used it to protect himself. I knew no one would suspect a loyal wife. He thought that if everything fell apart one day, you would take the blame. Leo opened his notebook and showed them copies of numerous documents. David, who had accompanied them, photographed them immediately. You can use this, the prisoner said. But do it fast. There are other people interested in keeping this quiet. And one of them is not very far away. Who? Sam asked. Leo hesitated, then said quietly, Isabella. She didn't leave. She's in Manchester. And she's not finished yet. On the bus back, Eleanor couldn't stop looking at the photographs of the documents. It was all there. Dates, names, signatures, account numbers, transfers. Everything Arthur had always hidden. But now they had something more than paper. They had an irrefutable truth. A truth that could shatter the last remnants of the man's facade. And as the bus moved through the rolling hills on its way home, Arthur sat before a mirror in a public restroom, splashing his face with cold water. He looked himself in the eye. For the first time in years. He didn't recognize the man in the reflection. Because the expensive suit was gone. Because the security had faded. And because very soon, he would have to face everyone he had once destroyed. Face them, with nowhere left to run. Eleanor got off the coach, clutching the copies of Leo's documents to her chest. The air in Manchester felt heavier that afternoon, as if the city itself sensed something was about to break. Beside her, Sam's gaze was lost in the distance. They hadn't spoken much on the long journey back. Sometimes when the soul is heavy, silence is more honest than any word. When they arrived home, the children greeted them with hugs and questions. Chloe was the last to approach, her expression serious, as if she had learned to read in her mother's eyes whether things were okay or not. How did it go? She asked bluntly. We got what we needed, Eleanor replied, stroking her hair. Sam went straight to his workshop. He needed to do something with his hands to keep his mind from racing, but as soon as he stepped through the door, he heard the chime of a notification from the mobile phone he'd left inside. It was a message from David. Urgent. Meeting with the prosecutor. Tomorrow at 8 a.m. Bring everything. Sam took a deep breath. This was it. The next day, they arrived at the prosecutor's office with a folder full of evidence statements, signed copies, Leo's documents. David was already waiting for them. He wore a dark suit, and he couldn't hide the tension on his face. Today, we present everything to the financial crimes prosecutor. If this goes forward, Arthur could be formally summoned within the next 72 hours. Eleanor and Sam looked at each other. Neither of them celebrated. There was no room for victory, only for the truth. They entered the interview room. The prosecutor, a woman with a serious, impassive face, examined each document with surgical precision. She didn't interrupt, just made notes. Finally, she looked up. This is very serious. What you've brought not only implicates Mr. Finch in fraud and forgery, but also shows signs of money laundering. And my name was used to shield all of it, Eleanor said, her voice firm but contained. And mine was forged to give it legitimacy, Sam added without blinking. The prosecutor nodded. We will act. But you must be prepared. People like this don't fall without dragging others with them. If he finds out you are behind this complaint, he may try to defend himself by attacking. We are used to that by now, Eleanor replied, without a hint of hesitation. The prosecutor took the documents and placed them in a folder marked with a red tab. Priority 1. Now, the next step is to locate him. Do you have any idea where he might be? David intervened. We know he's in Manchester. He has no fixed address. He might be sleeping on the streets. Are you sure about that? A close contact saw him 3 days ago, begging for food near Piccadilly Gardens. The prosecutor stood up. Then we will find him. Meanwhile, in an alley behind a supermarket, Arthur was sheltering from a relentless drizzle. His face was grimy, his clothes soaked with sweat and rain, his fingernails black with dirt. He had lost weight, and with it, his dignity. For days, he hadn't spoken to anyone. He didn't look for Isabella. He didn't track anyone down. He was resigned to waiting for oblivion. But in his mind, one thought kept circling, the idea that Eleanor couldn't have come this far without help. And he wasn't entirely wrong. That afternoon, as he got up to search for something to eat in a bin, a black car pulled up in front of him. 2 men in suits got out. They said nothing. They just showed him an official ID. Arthur Finch, you are being formally notified. You have 72 hours to appear before the Manchester Public Prosecutor's Office. Otherwise, a warrant will be issued for your arrest. They handed him the paper and drove off. Arthur was stunned. The paper trembled in his hand. He couldn't believe it. They had found him. For real. Eleanor had reported him. He sunk to the ground and read the document over and over. He felt anger, frustration, but above all, the sting of something he hadn't felt in years. Humiliation. Back at the house, Eleanor couldn't sleep that night. She was pacing the room. Chloe came downstairs and found her sitting in an armchair, her eyes staring into the darkness. Are you scared? The girl asked. No. I'm tired of being scared. Chloe sat down beside her. And what if he says it's all a lie? Eleanor looked at her gently. Then we will speak our truth louder. Because silence has never protected anyone. The next day, David called them early. His voice sounded different, almost agitated. There's more. This morning, someone presented themselves voluntarily at the prosecutor's office. Who? Arthur himself. Eleanor gripped the phone. And what did he say? He's asked to give a statement. But he's requested to do it alone, in front of me, in front of you and in front of the children. The children? He says he has something to tell them. Before the process begins. Eleanor hung up without answering. She looked at Sam, who had just come out of his room, and then, for the first time, her voice was loud and clear. Arthur is going to talk. But what he doesn't know is that this time we won't be the ones who are silenced. The meeting room at the public prosecutor's office had a different kind of silence than a courtroom. It was more tense, more contained, as if the walls themselves knew that what was about to be said was not just part of a file but the fallout of a shattered life. Arthur arrived in a wrinkled shirt, with a new beard and deep-set, hollow eyes. He was no longer the arrogant businessman who walked as if the world owed him respect. He was attired, defeated man who had shed his pride to cling to, at the very least, one word he had never before uttered with any sincerity: sorry. Opposite him, at a long rectangular table, sat David, the prosecutor, Eleanor, Sam, and, at Arthur's insistence, his 4 children. Not all of them understood why they were there. Mason was playing with a small toy car, oblivious. Chloe, in contrast, watched him with a mixture of anger and morbid curiosity. She didn't hate him, but she didn't forgive him either. "Thank you for coming," Arthur began, his voice lower than usual. "I know no one here wants to listen to me, and maybe I shouldn't be speaking, but if I stay silent now, I'll die with all of this inside me." Leo watched him with intense focus. Lily squeezed Chloe's hand. Arthur took a deep breath and bowed his head. When he lifted it again, there were tears in his eyes. I betrayed all of you. Not just as a father, as a husband, as a man. I sold you out. Literally. I used your names, your trust, your silence to protect my business, to protect myself. And while you were hungry, I was signing contracts with people whose middle names I didn't even know. Eleanor didn't interrupt him. She didn't cry. She didn't even blink. She just listened. When I ran out of money, I thought that was punishment enough. That sleeping on the street would make me understand. But it wasn't until I saw my own children playing on the other side of a park fence, without me, that I knew I had lost everything a long, long time ago. Chloe held his gaze. There was no hatred in it, only judgment, and that hurt more than anything. Eleanor, Sam, you taught me with your silence what I never learned with my power. I destroyed what we had. And even if I die right here, I want you to know that I have nothing left to hide. Arthur took an envelope out of his pocket and placed it on the table. Here are the names, the accounts, the transfers, the checks. Everything I hid. I signed it over to the prosecutor yesterday. If you want to destroy me, do it. But at least know that it's not just your word against mine anymore. The prosecutor took the envelope and opened it. She reviewed the papers, confirming their authenticity. David nodded. This changes the landscape. It corroborates what we already had, but it also makes it worse for him. Because now there's no doubt the fraud was intentional, and with direct damages. Arthur closed his eyes. He looked exhausted. I just want to say one more thing, he continued. To my children. If you ever speak of me one day, don't say I was evil. Just say I was weak. And that I didn't know what I had until I saw it in the hands of another man. Sam bowed his head, not out of pity, but out of a strange, reluctant respect. Arthur stood up slowly. I'm not asking for a hug. I didn't come to ask for a place back in your lives. I came to close the chapter that I opened with a kick. He looked at Eleanor one last time. Thank you for not teaching them to hate me. Eleanor didn't respond, but a single tear traced a path down her right cheek. Not for him, but for what her children had been forced to bear without understanding. That night, when they returned home, Chloe was the last one to enter. She stood on the threshold, looking up at the clear night sky. Do you believe him? She asked suddenly, without looking at her mother. I believe what he said. But that doesn't erase what he did. And if he's changed, he's changed. The point is, we are no longer the same people either. Chloe went inside and up the stairs without another word. In the prosecutor's office, David closed the file with trembling hands. He had never handled a case like this, so full of open wounds, of papers stained with tears, of names that were no longer just signatures, but scars. And in the middle of the corridor, as the clock struck 10 at night, Arthur sat on a bench in his cell, with his arms crossed. He had given up everything. But he still didn't know that someone else had not forgiven him. And that very soon, a figure from the past would cross his path again, seeking not justice but revenge. The silence of that night was not like the others. Although the house was calm, although the children were asleep and the neighborhood seemed quiet, something in the air felt out of place. Eleanor felt it the moment she turned off the light in her room. A restlessness ran through her body, as if the calm was merely a prelude to something about to shatter. Sam had noticed it too. He was in his workshop, pretending to organize his tools, but in reality, all he was doing was watching the half-open door, as if waiting for someone to knock on it again. After everything that had happened with Arthur, surprises no longer felt like signs of fate, but like warnings. And that warning arrived, but not with a knock on the door. It came as a figure that paused in front of the gate, observing the house from the shadows of a lamppost. A slender woman with long hair, her face almost completely obscured by a scarf, would have been unrecognizable if not for the precise way she held the leather bag slung over her shoulder. The same way as always. Isabella hadn't fled the country as everyone believed. Nor had she married some wealthy lawyer. She had disappeared strategically, because she knew the scandal would eventually reach her, and the only things she needed were time and silence. But now she was back. Not for Arthur, not for the business, but for something much more nebulous: vengeance. The next morning, David arrived at Eleanor's home with an envelope in his hand. This was delivered to my office. No return address, no warning, no context. Just a handwritten note and a photograph. He sat down in the living room. I don't know how to interpret it, but it's better that you see it. Eleanor opened the envelope. The photograph was old, very old. It showed Arthur with his arm around Isabella in what looked like a boardroom. Behind them, on a table, was a white envelope with Eleanor's name written on it in red marker. Sam took the handwritten note. It wasn't signed, just a single sentence. He wasn't the only one. She knew too. Eleanor felt a knot form in her throat. Do you think Isabella is trying to blame me again? David asked, shaking his head. No. This isn't an accusation. It's a message. A psychological game. To what end? Sam intervened. To scare them. To make them think there's something more buried, something she can use if things don't go her way. And is there? Chloe asked from the doorway. She had heard everything. No one answered. A few hours later, while Sam was reinforcing the lock on the workshop and David was making calls on his mobile, Eleanor shut herself in her room with the photograph in her hands. She didn't remember ever seeing that envelope in her home, never, but something inside her told her it wasn't out of place, that perhaps, without knowing it, she had been part of something much bigger. The possibility that Isabella had planned everything from the beginning wasn't absurd. She had always been smarter than she appeared. And if she was back now, it was because she still had cards left to play. That same night, a police report circulated internally among the prosecutors. A woman had been seen lurking in the Ashton area, asking for Arthur Finch's family. The description was precise, and so was the warning. Person of interest in the investigation of forgery and embezzlement should not be ignored. David received the report at 11 p.m. He read it with a frown and immediately called Eleanor. She's close. Isabella is nearby. What do we do? Nothing. We wait. If we confront her without proof, she could disappear again. But if we let her make a move, she might make a mistake. Eleanor hung up and went to the window, pulling back the curtain. There was no one in front of the house, only shadows, lampposts, and the echoes of a neighborhood that didn't yet know it was about to have a ghost resurrected. A ghost everyone believed was buried. Isabella, sitting on a park bench 3 blocks away, crossed her arms and smiled with a grimace. Now you'll know what it feels like to lose everything, she whispered as she lit a cigarette. Because what Arthur had done out of pride, Isabella was about to do with pure poison. And her next move already had a name. And that name was Chloe. Ever since that night the photograph of Isabella had emerged from the shadows, Eleanor no longer slept the same. It wasn't just fear that kept her awake, but the feeling that the coming damage wouldn't be direct but disguised. And when Isabella attacked, she never did it with her hands, she did it with ideas, with slow poison. The next few days passed with a suspicious calm. Too much silence, too much stillness. No new letter, no call, no anonymous message. It was as if Isabella had disappeared again, but David didn't believe it. When someone like her goes quiet, it's because she knows she's already cast the line. Eleanor knew it too, but she couldn't guess where the blow would land. Not until she found it among Chloe's school things, a handwritten invitation on a pink note card, in elegant script. You don't have to repeat your mother's mistakes. You can learn to aim higher. Just say yes. See you Thursday at 4 p.m. The address is on the back. Tell no one. Chloe hadn't shown it to her. She didn't even know her mother had discovered it. Eleanor kept the note and waited. She said nothing during breakfast, nor while Chloe was helping Sam in the workshop. She just watched her, the way she moved, the way she looked at her siblings, the way her expression shifted when she thought no one was watching. Chloe was confused, conflicted, and someone was taking advantage of that. On Thursday at 3:30, Eleanor decided not to confront her. Instead, she followed her at a distance, making sure she wasn't seen. Chloe walked through the streets of Ashton, her backpack slung over her shoulder, her steps firm buttons. She arrived at a white house with a high gate and large windows. She rang the bell, and a woman opened it for her. It was Isabella, without makeup, dressed simply in a white shirt and jeans. She looked like a different person, but Eleanor recognized her even from across the street. That woman could change her voice, her clothes, her language, but never her intentions. Isabella invited Chloe inside. Eleanor moved closer to the wall, hiding behind a parked van. Her heart was hammering. Inside the house, Isabella led Chloe into an elegant living room. I'm so glad you came, she said in a soft tone. You look so much like your mother when she was young. Although I think you have more character. Chloe said nothing. She was nervous but held her ground. What is this? Why did you seek me out? Isabella poured her a glass of water. Because I see potential. Because I don't want you to be extinguished in that neighborhood among tools and sawdust. You could study abroad, travel, create your own company. But for that you need someone who believes in you. Someone with resources and without resentments. And what do you want in return? Isabella smiled. Only your trust. And for you not to follow in your mother's footsteps. She chose poverty. You can choose something different. Chloe looked down. My mother didn't choose poverty. It was forced upon her. Isabella approached cautiously. Are you sure? Did you never wonder why she signed so many papers without reading them? Why she agreed to live with a man like Sam, who was your father's accomplice? Chloe looked at her, surprised. How do you know that? Because I was there. And believe me, no one in that house is as innocent as they seem. Outside, Eleanor couldn't take it anymore. She crossed the street and banged on the gate with force. Isabella opened it with the same false smile. What a surprise, she said. Are you here for your daughter, or to explain yourself? I'm here to tell you that if you ever come near any of my children again, there won't be a prosecutor's office to protect you. Chloe was standing behind Isabella, confused. Wounded? Mum, let's go, Eleanor commanded, without needing to raise her voice. Isabella didn't move. Sooner or later, Chloe will realize that with you, she has a roof over her head but not a future. I prefer a roof with dignity over a mansion with trapdoors, Chloe said, walking past both of them. I don't need what you are selling. Isabella watched her go. Eleanor followed without looking back. But something about that scene left a mark that neither of them would forget. Because Isabella wouldn't back down, and Chloe, though resolute, would go to bed that night with a question buried deep inside. What if her mother really was hiding something? Meanwhile, in the prosecutor's office, Arthur signed his final statement. He had no more expressions, no more words. He just handed over documents, dates, and names. David gave him a sheet with some new information. We have a trace on the hidden accounts in the Caymans. And there's a significant transfer destined for an account in the name of an Thorn. Arthur closed his eyes. I knew she'd be back. Why does she do it? Because she can't live without feeling she's on top. She doesn't even know what she's looking for anymore. She just wants to destroy what's left standing. David put the papers away. And that's your young daughter. Arthur didn't answer. But that night, on the concrete bench where he had slept for weeks, he wrote a new letter. Not addressed to the judge, nor the prosecutor, not even to Eleanor. It was for Chloe. Because he knew that Isabella didn't need weapons. She just needed doubt. And doubt in the heart of a young woman was more dangerous than any lie. Chloe locked herself in her room as soon as they got back from Isabella's house. She closed the door gently and sat on the floor, her back against the bed, staring at the wall as if projecting something only she could see. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. It was something deeper, like a crack that doesn't open suddenly, but widens slowly from within. Something in Isabella's words had struck a nerve she hated to admit she had doubt. Not because she believed everything the woman had told her, but because for a single second, she had felt that something didn't add up. And that 1 second was enough to make her falter. On the other side of the house, Eleanor was folding laundry, replaying the scene in her head over and over. She didn't regret following her or getting her out of there, but she couldn't deny that Chloe had come back different. She said nothing, didn't complain, didn't cry. And that was worse. Because when a child goes silent, it's because something is breaking. Sam tried to hide his own tension by sanding some pieces of wood in the workshop, but his concentration didn't last. He set his tools aside, cleaned his hands, and went to Chloe's room. He knocked gently. "Can I come in?" "It's open." He entered cautiously. Chloe was still sitting on the floor. "Do you want to talk?" "No." "Did she hurt you?" "No." Sam took a deep breath. "I just came to tell you that if you ever feel you don't understand something, or that something hurts you, you can tell me. You don't have to carry what you are thinking alone." Chloe looked at him for the first time. Her eyes were dry but shiny. "Do you think Mum is hiding something?" Sam was silent for a few seconds. "I think your mum has done everything she could to protect you all. Sometimes that includes holding back painful truths. Not because she wants to lie, but because it's not always possible to tell everything when the world is collapsing around you." Chloe looked down. "Isabella said you weren't as innocent as I believed." "Isabella is an expert at planting doubt. She's done it with everyone." Chloe nodded. She said nothing more. Sam left the room without pressing, closing the door gently. That night, while everyone slept, someone left an envelope under the door. Eleanor found it the next morning as she was sweeping the entrance. No return address, just her name written in black ink. She opened it. Inside was a letter. It was Arthur's handwriting. "Eleanor, I don't know if you'll read this, but if you do, I want you to know I'm not writing to justify myself, but to warn you. Isabella hasn't left. She won't because she's not looking for money. She wants to take the one thing she could never have, the respect of others. And to get it, she'll try to break the only thing you managed to build without me, your children. She'll start with Chloe. She'll make her doubt you, me, everyone. And if she falls, you fall too. I don't know if I deserve to help you, but I want to. I'm ready to declare everything, and if you let me, I can also tell the truth about what Isabella did to you all those years ago. Because you never told anyone about that either." Eleanor froze. Her face lost all its color. That last sentence seized her chest, as if the past was being ripped violently from the abyss. What Arthur was saying was real, and it wasn't a threat. It was a key. A door she had kept locked since before her children were born. Since long before the betrayal, the money, the ruin. That afternoon, Chloe went to school in silence. She carried her backpack heavily, her shoulders tense. Her heart was divided. Eleanor watched her leave without saying a word, but her mind was screaming. Isabella was getting closer, more subtle, more dangerous. Sam, seeing the look on her face, stopped his work. "What happened?" She showed him the letter. Sam read it from beginning to end without blinking. "What is he talking about at the end?" he asked, his voice low. Eleanor swallowed something she had buried years ago, something she had promised herself she would never touch again because if it came out, it would destroy her. And now? Eleanor looked at him. Now I think it's the only way to protect Chloe. Meanwhile, in a cafe in the city center, Isabella was looking through a thin file with pictures of Eleanor as a teenager. There were copies of documents, old newspaper clippings, and a handwritten note. If she doesn't talk, I will. Across from her, a young woman sat with her legs crossed and her face hidden by dark glasses, sipping a coffee with a neutral expression. Are you sure you want to use this? The woman asked. I'm sure, Isabella replied with a smile, that I have nothing left to lose. Because now it wasn't just revenge. It was personal. And she was about to put Eleanor in the one place she had always avoided, in front of her daughter, face to face with an exhumed truth, with nowhere to run. The wind howled with force that morning, as if something invisible wanted to rattle the windows of Eleanor's home before dawn. She hadn't slept. She sat at the dining table with a cold cup of coffee in her hands, staring at Arthur's letter. She had read it 3 times. Each word returned her to a different corner of her past, as if each line was tearing away a bandage she had refused to remove for years. Sam came downstairs without making a sound. He saw her there, her eyes red, and didn't need to ask if she'd slept. Are you sure you want to open that door again? He asked in a low voice. I don't want to. But I don't think I have a choice. Sam sat down opposite her. Eleanor took a breath. Her voice, when she spoke, was firm, but held the weight of accumulated years in every syllable. 20 years ago, when Arthur and I were about to get married, he asked me to sign a power of attorney to open a joint bank account. I didn't understand the numbers, I just trusted him. He told me it was to save for our future children. And it wasn't? No. That account was used to move money long before Chloe was born. But that's not the worst part. Sam watched her without interrupting. The worst part is that I found out a short time later and I did nothing. She paused. I knew something was wrong. I got a call from an outside accountant warning me. But I was pregnant, alone, scared. Arthur convinced me he would put everything into a family trust. He manipulated me, made me feel that if I spoke up, they would take everything from us. And I believed him. Sam lowered his gaze. So Isabella is involved in this to destroy you. Yes. If she uses those documents, she can prove I was a party to an illegal financial operation, even though I never touched a penny of it. And Chloe, if she finds this out from Isabella's mouth before mine, she will never forgive me for not telling her. A long silence stretched between them. Then you tell her, Sam said. Chloe came home from school later than usual. She walked in without a greeting, went upstairs, and shut herself in her room. Eleanor followed her up and knocked on the door. Can we talk? It's open. She entered. Chloe was sitting on her bed, her backpack in her lap. Everything okay at school? Yes. Did something happen? No. Eleanor sat beside her. I have to tell you something. Something I've owed you for many years. Chloe looked at her from the corner of her eye. It has to do with Isabella. It has to do with me. Eleanor told her everything. Without embellishments, without excuses. She told her about the documents, about the silence, about the fear, about how she had chosen to protect the family's stability instead of confronting Arthur when she still could have stopped him. Chloe said nothing throughout the entire story. She just listened, her face tense, her hands clasped. When Eleanor finished, she waited for a reaction, a shout, a demand, something. But Chloe just said, "So you knew, too." "Yes. And I've hated myself for it every single day." "I don't hate you," the young woman replied. "But I need to process this." Eleanor nodded. She stroked her hair before leaving the room, the door closing with a soft click that felt like a blow to her chest. That night, while the house slept, Chloe opened her notebook. She wrote only one sentence: "We all have a past, but not all of us face it. My mother is. I don't know if I can." The next day, Eleanor was summoned to the prosecutor's office. David was waiting for her with a grave expression. "We have a problem." "What happened?" Isabella presented herself at the tax office this morning with a folder of old, original documents. "All with your signature." "On the checks?" "Yes. And on another one from a company in another city. One you never knew existed, but that bears your name." Eleanor felt the ground beneath her feet begin to tremble. "That can't be. Isabella wants to negotiate. She says she won't officially file the case if you give her what she's asking for." "And what is she asking for?" David took a deep breath. "Custody of Chloe." Eleanor was speechless. "What?" "She doesn't want legal custody. She wants emotional control. For Chloe to stay with her for a while, to listen to her, to be with her. Away from you. It's not a petition. It's a veiled kidnapping." "I know. But if you don't act, Isabella will. And she has the weapons to do it." Eleanor gritted her teeth. "Then I will act." David looked at her. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to confront her. Not in the prosecutor's office. Not even in court. Where it hurts her most. In front of my daughter. Because if Isabella wants to sow doubt, I'm going to sow certainty. Even if it costs me everything. Even if I end up alone. Chloe she will never touch." The sky was turning grey. It wasn't raining, but the heavens were covered in an opaque color, as if they sensed something was about to break. Eleanor got dressed without any rush. She put on a simple blouse, tied her hair back, and looked at herself in the mirror as if for the last time, not out of vanity, but to confirm she was still standing, that she was still her. Chloe was eating breakfast in silence. Leo and Lily were laughing with Mason in the yard, unaware that on this morning something in their family was about to either break or be mended forever. It all depended on what would happen in the next hour. "Are you going out?" Chloe asked without looking up from her plate. "Yes," Eleanor replied. "I have some unfinished business." Chloe nodded. She didn't ask anything else, but just before her mother left, she stopped her with a short sentence. "Are you going to face it?" Eleanor turned around. "Yes. Because it's my past. Not yours." Isabella was waiting for her at the same restaurant where it had all begun years ago. The very place where Arthur had promised her financial freedom, where she had believed she could have it all. Instead, Eleanor, without knowing it, had been betrayed for a second time. She was sitting at the most discreet table by the window. She smiled as if she owed nothing to anyone. "You are punctual," Isabella said in a soft voice. "I always liked that about you." Eleanor didn't sit down. She just looked down at her from above. "You have 10 minutes. I don't need any more." Isabella took a folder out of her bag and placed it on the table without opening it. "You know what this is. Your misery. Your signature," Isabella corrected. "The one that can either drag you into a trial or to your daughter's pity. You decide which." Eleanor crossed her arms. "What's your price?" Isabella looked at her calmly. "I don't want money. Or houses or accounts." "Then what do you want?" "I want Chloe." Eleanor didn't blink. "You want my daughter. For her to listen to me. To live with me for a while. I want to show her the world that you denied her. The ambition you buried under your sewing and your long skirts. And if I say no?" Isabella smiled. "Then this folder goes to the prosecutor's desk today." Eleanor took a deep breath. "And what are you going to tell Chloe when she finds out you've been manipulating her with old documents and half-truths?" "I'll show her what you kept silent about. And I'll let her decide." Eleanor looked down for a second, then held her gaze firmly. "I'm not afraid of you, Isabella. But I'm not here for me. I'm here because you are not going to touch my daughter without going through me first. And if that means I have to give myself up," Isabella remained silent. "Are you serious? Do what you want with those documents. I will tell Chloe everything today. Straight. No more detours. And when I do, you will have no more power over her. And if she hates me, I'd rather she hate me for telling her the truth than love me for a lie." Isabella pushed the folder towards her. "Then take them. They're yours. Let's see if you have the courage to use them." Eleanor took it. She said nothing more. She turned around and walked away, slowly but surely. Outside, the wind was blowing harder. At home, Sam was making coffee when Eleanor entered. She didn't say a word. She just showed him the folder. She wanted to play her last card. "And you?" "I'm going to play mine." Chloe came down the stairs at that exact moment. Eleanor looked at her. The folder was in her hand. "This is what Isabella showed you." "No. This is what she didn't want you to see from me." Chloe came closer. "Are we going to read it?" "Yes. But together." They sat at the dining table. Eleanor opened the folder and began to explain, page by page, document by document, signature by signature, date by date. She hid nothing. She softened nothing. She justified nothing. Chloe listened to her in silence. At the end, she took one of the pages and tore it into 4 pieces. "Thank you for telling me. For you. Not for me. For you. Do you forgive me?" "I don't know. But I believe you." Eleanor hugged her, and in that embrace, something was mended. But while that was happening, at the prosecutor's office, David received an urgent report. Isabella had disappeared again. But this time, she wasn't alone. A young girl with dark hair had been seen getting into a taxi with her. No cameras, no license plate. Just a suitcase, a folder, and a name. Lily. David ran down the corridor of the prosecutor's office with the report in his hand, bursting through the door without waiting for it to fully open. Eleanor was already there, waiting, sitting with her fingers interlaced on the desk. When he saw her, he didn't try to soften the blow. "Isabella disappeared this morning," he said, without preamble. "And she didn't do it alone." Eleanor stood up instantly. "What are you saying?" A witness reported seeing her getting into a taxi with a young girl. The description fits Lily. For a moment, all the sounds of the office vanished. All that was left was a dull ringing in Eleanor's ears and the sound of her own ragged breathing. "That's impossible. She was at home this morning." David shook his head. "There's no record of her leaving school. She wasn't there. And a neighbor saw a taxi near the corner at 8 o'clock. It wasn't the usual time. No one recognized the woman, but the girl fits." Eleanor clenched her teeth. "I can't believe it. I can't. I need you to think clearly. Have you had any contact with Isabella recently?" "Of course not. She didn't take her. Lily wouldn't go with a stranger." "She would never." "She wasn't a stranger," David said. "She was tricked." David's phone rang. His voice became more tense. "We have the taxi number. They took her towards the coast. But we have no cameras beyond the secondary roads. We are blind from there." "The coast? What's there?" Eleanor asked. "Nothing relevant. Except for an old property in the name of a frontman linked to Isabella. In a rented house in the south of the city." Isabella opened the door with a smile. Lily entered, looking confused. The house was clean, smelled of cinnamon, and the walls were freshly painted. "This is where we'll do the interview?" "Yes," Isabella said smoothly. "We are going to record a little video to talk about your family. But first, let's have some breakfast." The girl sat down, still uncertain. "My mum knows I came." "Of course she does," Isabella lied. "She gave me permission to bring you." "Don't worry. This is just to show how grown up you are, what a smart girl you are. Everyone will be so proud." Lily looked down. "And why did you choose me?" Isabella smiled. "Because you are not afraid to ask questions. Because you see things others don't. And because you are stronger than you think." Sam got the news over the phone. He didn't say a word during the entire call. When he hung up, he looked at Leo, who was carving a piece of wood with the kind of focus only a child can have in the midst of chaos. "Did you see Lily this morning?" "No. She just waved at me from the window." Sam ran out of the house. Eleanor was waiting for him in the living room, trembling. Chloe had just arrived from school, and when she heard about the disappearance, she felt a cold stab in her chest. It was Isabella. "It was me. I let this into our family again," Chloe cried, hitting the wall with the palm of her hand. "Don't say that," Eleanor shouted at her. "It's not your fault. That woman came to destroy us long before you." Sam tried to remain calm. What if she didn't take her by force? What if Lily went on her own? "Sam," Eleanor said, her voice shaking, "Lily doesn't go anywhere with anyone without asking. You know that." They drove to the designated property in an unmarked police car. The journey was long, but every passing minute felt like a lifetime. Eleanor didn't blink, just repeated her daughter's name like a prayer. Lily. Lily. When they arrived, the house was white, 2 stories, with high bars on the windows and a wooden gate. A van was parked outside. That's her, David said. What do we do? Chloe asked. We go in, Eleanor replied. But I go first. David nodded. A couple of officers picked the lock. They entered cautiously. Inside, the house was silent, the lights off. In the middle of the room, on a table, was a folded piece of paper. It was a drawing, and on the back, written in the same childish hand, I'm okay. I don't like this place. Mum, come get me. But there was no sign of Lily or Isabella. Just a tape recorder on which a soft voice repeated in a loop. Don't run. Don't scream. Don't trust. And next to the recorder, a key with a label that read, Next stop, Glasgow. The tape recorder kept repeating the same words in that soft, almost hypnotic voice of Isabella's, a voice that seemed designed to unravel reason. Don't run. Don't scream. Don't trust. Eleanor slammed the off button. The silence that followed was even more deafening. Chloe held Lily's drawing in her hands as if it were an encrypted message. The paper trembled, not from the wind, but from her own shaking. Glasgow, Sam whispered, looking at the key with the dangling label. It must be a property that Arthur or Isabella used before. David nodded. I have records of an old warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It was seized years ago for suspicious movements, but the case was never closed. She could have reacquired it through a third party. And what are we supposed to do? Stand here. Eleanor said, her eyes blazing. Let's go get my daughter. David tried to remain calm. We have to proceed with caution. Isabella doesn't think like everyone else. She won't act with violence. Her way is different. She plays with the mind. She'll try to make Lily doubt you, her history, herself. Then we'll get there before she can plant any seeds of doubt, Eleanor replied. The road to Glasgow was almost empty. It was late evening. Only the hum of the engine and the sound of the wind beating against the windows accompanied the 4 people inside the car. David was driving. Eleanor was in the passenger seat. Chloe and Sam were in the back, in silence. Each of them was holding on to something like an anchor. Chloe, the drawing. Sam, a small wooden toy that Lily had carved in the weeks before. Eleanor, the note from Isabella she had kept, even though it hurt to look at it. The landscape changed as they left the city behind. The lights became fewer, the sky darker, the air colder. What if she's not there? Chloe asked. Then we keep going, Eleanor said without turning around, until we find her. At the warehouse in Glasgow, Lily was sleeping in a makeshift room on a clean rug with a pink blanket. Isabella hadn't treated her badly. She hadn't shouted at her, hadn't scared her. And that made everything worse. She spoke to her calmly, cooked for her, told her stories. But that night, Lily had a dream that woke her with a stifled cry. She dreamed she was walking alone down a long corridor, and her mother was calling her, but she couldn't see her. When she woke up, she sat up on the rug, panting. Isabella was there, sitting on a chair. A nightmare, she asked. Do you want to talk about it? Lily shook her head. Isabella stood up and poured her a glass of water. "Your mother is fine," she said in a sweet voice. "She just doesn't understand that you are not a little girl anymore. She treats you as if you can't make your own decisions." Lily looked down. "I didn't decide to come here." "Perhaps not," Isabella conceded. "But now you can decide what to think. And that, my dear, is worth more than any freedom." The girl didn't answer, but inside, something began to resist. Isabella didn't notice. Not quite. David's car stopped a few hundred meters from the warehouse. It was nearly 4 in the morning. The light from an old lamp hanging over the entrance gate was the only illumination. The silence was absolute. Not even a dog barked. "We go in fast and without making a sound," David ordered. Eleanor didn't wait for instructions. She got out first. The back door of the warehouse wasn't secured. Sam pushed it open. Inside, a dark corridor, the smell of damp, and the creak of old wood under their feet. They moved forward without a word. At the back, a faint light shone from a half-open door. Isabella had her back to them, sitting next to Lily, who had fallen asleep again. Eleanor took a step forward. "Don't you dare touch her." Isabella turned slowly, without surprise. "You got here faster than I thought." Chloe then came forward with the drawing in her hand. "What are you planning?" "Nothing," Isabella said. "Just showing her there's more than one way to see life." "You kidnapped her," Sam growled. Isabella smiled. "Do you really believe this is a kidnapping?" "She's fine. She's eaten, she's slept, she talked. She hasn't been locked up." Eleanor went to the bed. Lily woke up when she felt her presence, opened her eyes, saw her, and without a word, threw herself into her arms. "Mom!" Isabella stood up silently, without moving. David entered at that moment with 2 officers behind him. "Isabella Thorne, you are under arrest for unlawful deprivation of liberty." She didn't resist. She just raised her hands. Finally, they got something right. As she was being led away, Isabella turned one last time towards Eleanor. "The next battle won't be with me. It will be with the world. And that, Eleanor, you can't stop." On the way back in the car, Lily slept with her head in her mother's lap. Chloe stroked her hair. No one said a word, but that peace was fragile, because Isabella had left something else behind. On the same chair where she had been sitting, there was a small wooden box. And inside it, photographs. Dozens of them. Some of Eleanor, others of Chloe, and one, in particular, of a young boy with Sam's eyes. And another note. "Do you know who this is?" The whole truth had not yet come out. The small box, made of pale, smooth wood, had a sliding lid that made no sound when it opened. Chloe was the first to see it when they returned home after the ordeal. It was there, on an armchair, as if someone had placed it with care and precision. No broken windows, no signs of forced entry. Just the box, and the silent question that everyone felt in their chest. Who had left it? Sam took it in his hands and opened it carefully. Inside were dozens of photos, arranged chronologically. At first, there were familiar images, a young Eleanor, some taken in front of the old diner where she used to work. Then others of Chloe as a baby, of Mason in Eleanor's arms, of the children playing on a park bench. But at the back, alone among them all, was a different photograph. A boy of no more than 8, with dark hair and serious eyes that didn't smile. He was standing on a dirt playing field in a school uniform. And on the back, written by hand, a message, "Do you know who he is?" Sam felt his stomach clench. Eleanor noticed. She moved closer to him. "Do you recognize him?" Sam was silent, staring at the child's face as if he were looking at himself through time. There was something in his eyes, in the way he stood, that was all too familiar. "It can't be," he murmured. "Who is it, Sam?" "I don't know for sure. But if it's who I think it is, this goes beyond anything we believed." Chloe watched them from the stairs. "It's yours." Sam looked up. "I don't know. But it could be. And someone made sure I never knew." That night, when the children were asleep, Sam went out onto the porch with the photo in his hand. Eleanor followed him. They sat on the wooden bench he had made with Leo. "Tell me what you are thinking," she asked. "Years ago, when I was working in my uncle's woodshop back home, I met a woman. Her name was Maritza. It was brief, complicated. She was intense, and I was running from everything. It only lasted a few months. One day, she just disappeared. She left me a note saying she needed to rebuild her life and didn't want any ties. You never looked for her." "I tried. But I couldn't find her. Her number didn't work anymore, and at the address she gave me, they told me she had gone." "And you think that child?" "The face is almost identical to mine at his age. I don't want to jump to conclusions. But Isabella knew enough about me to dig this up. And to use it now, it's not a coincidence. It's the final nail. The lowest blow. And if that child exists, if he's mine, then I don't just have a debt to this house. I have another one. And someone has decided to cash it in right now." David arrived early the next day with Isabella's file under his arm. "We found this among her things," he said. "There are partial adoption papers signed in Glasgow. The mother is listed as Maritza R. Santos. The boy, Julian, born in 2014. The dates match." "Where is he now?" Sam asked, his voice raw. "In a reception center. He was left there a year ago by a woman who said she couldn't take care of him anymore. No one has visited him since. So Isabella found him months ago. And from what we can see, she was planning to use him. Use him as emotional currency. As a threat. As a reminder that she always knew more than everyone else." Chloe approached. "And are we just going to leave him there?" "No," Eleanor answered before anyone else could. "We are going to find him." A few days later, in a sterile building in the center of Glasgow, Sam sat in front of a metal table. He was accompanied by a social worker, kind but firm. Opposite him, in a playroom, was Julian. He was playing alone with some colored blocks. "Do you want to talk to him?" the worker asked. "Yes. But does he know anything about me?" "No. Only that you've come to meet him." Sam took a deep breath and walked towards the child. He knelt down. "Hello. I'm Sam." Julian looked up at him. "Are you the man from the photograph?" "Yes." "Who showed it to you?" "A lady who used to come here." She said you were someone important. Sam felt his throat tighten. Do you want to talk for a while? Do you make toys? Yes? Then yes. Eleanor watched them from the corridor. Chloe was by her side. And what if he's not your son? Chloe asked Sam later. Then he's a boy who deserves to be loved all the same. Chloe looked down, then up again. I want to meet him. You will, Eleanor said. But slowly. One step at a time. When they returned to Manchester, Eleanor sat on the bed with all the children around her. Mason asked why they had been so far away. Leo wanted to know who Julian was. He's someone who might need a place, she said. I don't know what will happen yet. But if he comes to live with us, it won't be out of charity. It will be because he, too, is a part of this story. No one objected. No one argued. That night, Eleanor closed her bedroom door with a sense of certainty. Isabella had shot her last arrow, but she hadn't counted on the fact that in doing so, she had given this family the chance to heal something they didn't even know was broken. Only in the silence of her cell, Isabella had one more plan. One that didn't require her freedom, but just a letter. And a very specific recipient. Arthur. Arthur wasn't sleeping. He had gotten used to it. The cold of the cell, the hard mattress, and the sounds of the other inmates were the least of it. What really kept him awake were the memories. The ones that came without permission, the ones that hurt. He had in his hand a piece of paper, folded in half. He had received it that morning, delivered by a guard who told him nothing. No return address, just his name written in a perfect, elegant script. It was from Isabella. He had read it 5 times. Arthur, I don't care if you are still breathing. I don't care if you've learned to ask for forgiveness. I just want you to know that I did it. I made them look at each other. I made them doubt. I showed them that the truth is never just one thing. And you, who spoke so much of power, ended up begging for respect. I don't hate you, Arthur. Hatred requires memory. I erased you years ago. But there is still something that belongs to me, and when you die, you won't be able to protect him. See you soon. Goodbye. Arthur crumpled the letter but didn't tear it. He left it on his cot. He took a deep breath. He felt that every letter was a nail but also a warning. Isabella hadn't given up. Even from behind bars, she was still moving the pieces from inside. She had connections, allies, and more. She still believed she had the right to take what he had never known how to care for. He stood up with difficulty and asked to speak to his public defender. When he arrived, Arthur received him with a pale face. I want to make a voluntary statement, Arthur said, and I want to deliver it in the presence of Eleanor, Sam, and my children. What are you going to declare? Everything. From the beginning. And something more. I want to make it clear that if something happens to me in here, it won't be an accident. Back at the house, while breakfast was being served amidst jokes and the smell of toast, Eleanor felt a pang in her chest. Something wasn't right. The recent peace, which was barely beginning to settle, felt artificial, as if the calm had been manufactured only to make the storm hurt more. Chloe had gone out with Mason to the market. Leo was working in the workshop with Sam, who was trying to keep his mind busy so he wouldn't look at the photo of Julian, which now hung from a string with a clothes peg, as if waiting for a confirmation of life. Julian hadn't come home yet. The fostering process required adaptation, interviews, evaluations. But Sam already felt it, and that feeling scared him more than any legal summons, because if he lost him, he wouldn't know how to go on. That same day, David knocked on the door with a serious expression. "We have to go to the prison. Arthur wants to talk. He says it's urgent." Eleanor looked at him, her soul weary. "Again? This time it seems it's for good." Chloe offered to go with them. Sam too. They got into the car without saying much. The journey to the prison was slow, as if time was deliberately stretching itself out. When they arrived, they were led to a room with bone-colored walls and plastic chairs. Arthur was already there. Thinner, paler, older. But his eyes were strangely clear, as if something had been lifted from them. "Thank you for coming," he said. No one answered. "I don't want to justify anything. I just want to close what I left open." He took out an old, worn notebook full of scribbles. "Here I wrote everything I never said. What I did, what I signed, what I stole. But also what I was before I became what you saw. I wasn't a monster at the beginning. I was broken into pieces. Slowly. Like someone getting used to poison." Chloe crossed her arms. "And what do you expect now?" Arthur looked at her with a strange tenderness. "Nothing. I don't expect anything anymore. I just want you to know that Isabella hasn't stopped. And that her last target isn't money. It's you. Especially him." He pulled out another piece of paper. It was an unofficial copy of Julian's birth certificate, but clear enough to reveal something more. She hadn't just found the child. She had registered him with her surname. And if you don't act quickly, she can move her influences from inside to claim legal guardianship even while in custody. Sam stepped forward, read the paper, and confirmed what he feared. "How do you know this?" "Because I saw it in her notebook. The one she left on the table. Isabella is never careless, except when she wants someone to see. And I saw it, I copied it, and now I'm giving it to you." David took the document. "We are going to use this. But we have to move now. Before she presents it through other means." Arthur stood up slowly. "I have nothing left outside or inside. I only ask that you don't let her win by default. Because that child, he can still have something that I never knew how to give you." Eleanor said nothing, but before leaving, she approached him. She didn't hug him, didn't touch him. She just said, "Thank you for not dying with that in your mouth." Leaving the prison, the air felt thicker. David was on the phone, activating contacts in Glasgow. Chloe walked in silence, her hands clenched. Sam looked at the horizon as if he expected to see Julian running towards him. But that night, when they returned home, they found something unexpected on the living room table. A cardboard box, and inside, an envelope sealed with red wax, a note taped to the lid. This didn't come from Isabella. It came from someone else. The past was still seeking its own justice. And under the envelope, a photograph of Eleanor next to a man no one in the house had ever seen. Except her. Because that man had died 17 years ago. Eleanor didn't need a second look at the photograph to know who it was. The man's face, though worn by the passage of time and barely preserved in an old black and white image, was still etched into her memory. No one else in the house recognized him because no one else had known him. Sam took the photo carefully. "Who is it?" he asked. Eleanor sunk into an armchair without a word. She clasped her hands in her lap, and for the first time in a long while, she seemed unable to find the words. Chloe approached, her expression worried. "Mom?" Eleanor looked up. She was pale. "His name was Liam. And before you were born, Chloe, before I even knew Arthur, he was my first love." Sam frowned. "I only heard his name once, years ago. When Eleanor told me that before everything, she had a past she preferred not to stir. He died in an accident. Or so I was told. On the motorway to Glasgow. They never found the body. Just his ID, a wallet, and some papers. That's all they gave me." "Then what is that photograph doing in this box?" Eleanor picked up the envelope that came with the picture. The red wax seal was still intact. She broke it slowly. Inside was a handwritten note. "Eleanor, there are truths that never die, even if the person who holds them does. Liam didn't die in that accident. They hid him. And they did it because he knew something he shouldn't have known. Something that implicated them, and that was protecting you." David, who had arrived a few minutes earlier, listened in silence. He drew closer. "This makes sense to you, doesn't it?" "Yes," she replied, still in shock. Liam worked as an accountant at a private consulting firm. He always said he had a gift for numbers. I met him in Glasgow when I went to visit my aunt. It was all so intense, so clean. And then he was just gone. What things did he know? I don't know, Eleanor said, and for the first time, her voice sounded uncertain. We never talked about anything illegal. I didn't know anything about his work. I was just a young girl who wanted to be in love. Sam looked at David. Do you think this is connected to everything Isabella was dragging up? David nodded slowly. Possibly. She knew more about all of us for years. She used information as a weapon. And if this is what it looks like, then there's another player in this game. Someone else? Chloe asked. Yes. Someone who isn't Arthur, isn't Isabella, isn't you, isn't me. Someone who has been moving the pieces for a long time and who until now has not shown their face. That night, while the children slept, Eleanor reopened her old wooden chest. She took out a box of letters tied with a blue ribbon. They were from her youth. Liam's letters. She read them one by one in silence. In the last one, written a few weeks before his supposed accident, there was a phrase that now made her skin crawl. If I ever disappear, don't think I've abandoned you. Perhaps I'll disappear because I love you more than you understand right now. She cried in silence. Sam didn't interrupt her. He just brought her a cup of hot tea and sat beside her. What if he's alive? What if all of this is a warning? Eleanor asked. And what if my story isn't the only one that's incomplete? The next morning, David arrived with a printed sheet in his hand. It's a death certificate that's been reopened due to inconsistencies. The Glasgow prosecutor's office received an anonymous request yesterday to investigate the death of Liam O'Connell. There's no official medical record, only a report signed by a rural doctor who died a year later in similar circumstances. What does that mean? Chloe asked. That there's a real probability that the man is still alive. Eleanor brought a hand to her mouth. Not from fear but from shock. The past that had wreaked such havoc was now re-emerging with a different identity, a different version, a different truth. David placed another paper on the table. And there's more. In one of the seized accounts in the name of one of Arthur's front companies, a recent deposit appeared. Not from Isabella. From someone with the initials LO. Chloe took a step back. Liam O'Connell. It's a possibility, David said. But if it's true, then there's someone who has been watching them for years without intervening. Until now. Eleanor squeezed the envelope she still held in her hands, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a new certainty. That story wasn't over. It hadn't even begun to be told for real. Because if Liam was alive, then everything she thought was buried was about to come to light. And with it, a secret that could destroy more than the past. The present. The photograph remained on the table, but no one else in the house touched it. Only Eleanor watched it from the other end of the dining room, as if she could erase it with the power of her gaze. The face of the man was still there. Liam. Her past. Her oldest wound. The envelope with the note was still open but said little more. No sender, no signature or date. Just that unsettling warning. This wasn't Isabella's work. It was someone else's. David showed up early that morning. He had reviewed the photo, scanned the letter, and ordered a cross-search on official and unofficial databases. The result was immediate and alarming. There is a man registered as Liam O'Connell, presumed dead 17 years ago. But there's an immigration movement in his name from 2021. He crossed through Central America and re-entered 6 months later with new documents. A different identity. Eleanor covered her mouth. He's alive. David nodded. It seems so. Sam clenched his jaw. And why now? Why after all these years send this? We don't know. But if it wasn't Isabella who brought it to you, then there's another player in this story. Someone who is pushing them to look back. And with a reason, Chloe entered at that moment with the wooden box they had kept from the warehouse where Lily was rescued. She opened the lid and from the bottom pulled out one more envelope. They had missed it. It was hidden under a false bottom. You could only find it if you pressed down hard. Eleanor took it with trembling hands. When she opened it, she found a letter addressed to her, and inside, a folded sheet with a familiar handwriting. Liam's. Eleanor. They told me you were dead. They told me you never wanted to know about me. But I still kept every one of your letters. I wasn't the one who intended to disappear. They made me disappear because I refused to sign some papers linking a politician to a front company. I had proof, and someone warned me that if I didn't leave, you would pay the price. I left. I hid. I thought about coming back 1,000 times. But I didn't until I saw your picture in the paper and I knew you were still alive. I want to see you. Not for what we were, but for what you need to know. The silence in the room was absolute. Only the clock marked the rhythm of time like a slow drum. Sam bowed his head. "And what are you going to do?" Eleanor responded slowly. "I'm going to go." Chloe didn't hesitate. "I'm going with you." "No," Eleanor replied, looking at her with a gentle firmness. "This time, I have to go alone." The address was written in pencil on the back of the letter. A simple house on the outskirts of Glasgow. David accompanied her on the journey, but respected her silence. Eleanor said nothing the whole way. She held the letter as if it were fragile, but at the same time, as if holding it made her stronger. When they arrived, she stopped in front of a single-story house with a small garden and a wooden bench under a tree. She knocked just once. A few seconds later, the door opened, and there he was. His hair was grayer, he was thinner, but he had the same clear gaze. "Liam?" Eleanor didn't cry, didn't shout, didn't run. She just stared for a second. "Is it you, Liam?" He nodded. "Yes. But I'm not the same man from back then." "Neither am I." They went inside without saying more. They sat in the living room. "Why now?" she finally asked. "Because I thought it was too late. But then I understood that time doesn't erase what one doesn't face. And I have something you need to face." Liam took a folder from a drawer and placed it on the table. "Here? Here are the names, the contracts, the bank transactions. The network that started in Glasgow and then reached Manchester. Arthur was just a piece. Isabella another. But there's something higher up. And I know it." Eleanor's posture tensed. "Were you protecting me or using me?" "I was protecting you. They threatened me with you. They used a photo of you with a date and time to tell me they could make you disappear if I didn't. And I couldn't risk it. I did what I thought was right, even if it was cowardly. And now? Now I want you to use this to close what I didn't know how to stop." Eleanor opened the folder. Old documents, recognizable signatures, official seals, and one page at the end with a phrase written by hand. "History is not written by those who run, but by those who return." Eleanor looked at him. This could be the end of everything or the beginning of something new. That night back at home, Eleanor gathered Sam, Chloe, and David in the living room. She placed the folder on the table. "This is the root. This is where it all began. With this, we can clear the names of those who don't deserve it." David looked through the papers. His expression became more and more serious with each page. "This goes straight to the federal prosecutor. There are not just businessmen here, but judges, politicians, and active officials. If this goes public, someone will want to silence him, and not with words." Chloe understood immediately. "Are you in danger?" "Yes," Eleanor said. "But this time, I'm not going to hide." Sam looked at her in silence. "I won't let you do this alone." Eleanor took a deep breath. "Then get ready. Because tomorrow we deliver this. And when we do, everything will change. Because pulling up a rotten root doesn't just make the tree fall. It exposes what no one wanted to see. And in that earth full of secrets, there was still one last seed left to sprout. The truth about Chloe." The new day began with a thick silence. It wasn't like the ones before. it wasn't the peace that is breath after a storm. It was the tense stillness that precedes a great explosion. Eleanor was awake before everyone else. She sat in the dining room with the photograph in her hands and Liam's letter on the table. She hadn't slept. She couldn't. What she had found inside that folder the night before not only confirmed that Liam was alive, but it confirmed something more devastating, something she had believed buried for 17 years, something she herself didn't know if she was prepared to say, but could no longer keep hidden. Chloe entered the kitchen, her hair messy, her school uniform half on. She stopped when she saw her mother's expression. "Is everything okay?" "I need to talk to you, Chloe," Eleanor said. "Now, it's important." Chloe left her backpack on a chair and sat opposite her. Eleanor took the photograph and showed it to her. "You remember it?" "Yes. It's the same man from the photo in the box. His name was Liam." Eleanor swallowed. "I loved him. Before Arthur, before you, before this life." Chloe frowned. Eleanor took a few seconds to say it, but when she did, her voice didn't tremble. "Chloe, you are his daughter." Time stopped. Chloe remained still. She didn't even blink. She just slowly lowered her gaze and after a few seconds said, "What are you saying?" "I thought he was dead. They told me his body never appeared, but they signed a death certificate. And shortly after, I found out I was pregnant. And you never said anything." "I didn't know. I thought it was Arthur's. We were together, we had made plans. And when he found out I was pregnant, he claimed you as his own. And I accepted it. It was easier not to ask, easier not to look back." Chloe got up and took a few steps towards the window. She looked out at the yard where Mason and Leo were playing among the wood planks of the workshop. "So, Arthur isn't my father." Eleanor shook her head. "Not by blood." Chloe closed her eyes. She didn't cry. She just breathed. "And why now?" "Because someone is using your story to hurt us. To divide us. And the only way to protect you is by telling you everything, even if you hate me for it." "I don't hate you. But I need time." "I know." Sam had heard everything from the doorway. He didn't enter, didn't give an opinion, didn't judge. He knew that moment was just for them. But when Chloe went out onto the porch, he was there, looking straight ahead. "Did you know? I found out last night." "And what do you think?" Sam shrugged with sincerity. "That it changes nothing. That you are my daughter, too. Even if it doesn't say so on a piece of paper. Even if you don't come from me." Chloe looked down, and for the first time in a long time, she hugged him with all her strength. "Thank you for not leaving." Later, David returned with more documents. "Liam gave us a list of names. One of them belongs to a prosecutor who was active in Glasgow, a man who, according to the records, was the one who signed off on Liam's disappearance, pressured by businessmen who later became Arthur's partners." "We are touching something much bigger," David said. "This isn't just a family story. This is high-level corruption. There will be people who want to silence you." "Then let them hear me loud and clear," Eleanor replied. But David wasn't finished. "And there's more. Liam has asked to see Chloe. He says not to approach as a father, but to give her something. Eleanor looked at her daughter. Chloe hesitated for a few seconds, but then nodded. I want to hear him. The meeting took place in a secure room at the public prosecutor's office. Chloe entered alone. Liam was already waiting. He wasn't in uniform or handcuffs, just simple clothes and a weary expression. Thank you for coming, he said. Chloe didn't respond. I don't expect anything. I just wanted to give you this. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a photo. Her as a baby in Eleanor's arms. On the back a date and a signature. I never knew you, but I always dreamed of you. Chloe felt a lump in her throat. Why did you leave me? Because they made me believe it was the right thing to do. And I didn't know how to fight the fear. Me neither, Chloe whispered. Liam smiled faintly. Then maybe we are not so different. Chloe looked at him with more tenderness than judgment. Thank you for telling me. She left without another word, but something inside her felt lighter. That night at home, Eleanor received a new letter. No sender, no signature. But this time, the handwriting was not Isabella's or Liam's. It was someone else's. It just said, the circle is closing. The last piece has woken up, and you won't be able to avoid what's coming. And underneath, cut from a newspaper, a note that read, Samuel Croft under federal investigation for concealment. The final storm was about to begin. The newspaper clipping remained on the dining room table. Eleanor hadn't moved since reading the last line. Sam's name in a column linking him to a federal concealment investigation wasn't just another accusation, it was a bomb. And this one hadn't come from Isabella, or Liam, or anyone they had identified. It was someone else. Someone who knew exactly where to strike. Sam arrived shortly after with the children in the car. He didn't notice anything strange until he saw Eleanor's eyes. One look was enough for him to understand that something had shifted in his world. She showed him the note in silence. He read it completely, without interrupting, without showing a reaction. But when he finished, he sat down in a chair as if the air had been knocked out of him. Did you know this could happen? She asked. He knew there were things that didn't quite add up, but he didn't know someone had proof, nor that they would be willing to use it now. And what did you do? What I've always done. Protect you. But maybe I was wrong in how I did it. David arrived minutes later, his brow furrowed. We've confirmed it, he said flatly. The complaint was sent anonymously from an encrypted account. It includes documents from over 15 years ago. Some signed by Arthur, others with your signature, Sam. Documents for what? Maintenance contracts for public works in Glasgow. Front companies appear, the same ones now linked to the network Liam tried to report. Eleanor closed her eyes. Sam, what did you sign? Yes, but I didn't know what it was. They gave it to me in a folder as part of a consultancy job. Arthur told me it was to formalize woodworking in rural schools. I never imagined. David interrupted him. They are going to summon you as a witness first. But if you don't clarify, you could be charged as an accomplice. And who is behind this? David took a deep breath. The funny thing is, this doesn't have Isabella's mark on it. It's more sophisticated. More political. Chloe appeared in the doorway. And what if it's not an enemy, but someone who wants to clean everything up in their own way? Everyone looked at her. What if they are not trying to punish us, but force us to let go of what we are still hiding? Sam bowed his head. I don't have an answer. That night, the air in the house was suffocating. No one laughed, no one spoke loudly. Leo asked if they could watch a movie. Mason wanted to know if Julian was coming back. Lily just drew. Chloe locked herself in her room and took out her notebook. She wrote, I thought the past stayed where you bury it. But now I understand that the past never dies. It just waits for the present to open the door for it. The following morning, Sam appeared at the prosecutor's office with David. He was questioned for over 3 hours. When he left, he had a vacant look. So? Eleanor asked. I don't know. But what I do know is that something is moving from above. David was clear. We received another threat. If we don't stop the investigation into the frozen accounts, they'll leak a video. One where you, Sam, were recorded years ago. Sam went pale. What video? One where you appear with Arthur signing papers in a country house. On the exact dates that coincide with the phantom contracts. Sam put his hand to his face. That day I thought we were signing the closing minutes of a project. They gave me whiskey. I felt dizzy, but I signed. I signed everything. That video is already in the hands of a journalist. If it leaks, there's no going back. Eleanor went out to the yard alone. That night she looked at her home, listened to her children's soft laughter in their rooms, and felt a pang in her chest. Not just anger, but disappointment. Not in Sam, but in herself, for believing the worst was over. She entered her room and found him sitting in the dark. Nothing was said for several seconds. What are you going to do? She asked. I'm not going to run. Then get ready. For what? To lose me. Because if this reaches the children, I can't stay. Sam closed his eyes tightly. Don't leave me alone with this. You left me alone years ago when you signed without thinking. Only now, I don't have any more room for silence. Chloe was listening from the top of the stairs. She didn't cry, but something inside her broke too. Because this time, the rupture didn't come from an enemy, but from the only place she believed was solid. Her home. And while Eleanor slept, a new letter arrived, stuck to the fence with tape. It simply said the next name had been chosen. This time it was Mason's. The paper was damp with the morning mist, but the letters were still clearly legible. Eleanor held it in her hand as if it were poison. The note taped to the fence with black, cold, direct tape without a signature. The next name has been chosen. This time it's Mason. There was no screaming, no scandal. Just a dry silence that seized the throats of everyone who read it. Chloe was the first to react. She ripped the paper from the fence in a fury and tore it into pieces in front of her mother. We are not playing this game anymore. We are not going to let them stalk us, threaten us. Eleanor grabbed her by the arm, her grip strong. Chloe, listen to me. No. Enough. They've already messed with you, with Sam, with Julian, with me, and now with Mason. What's next? Lily? Leo? No more. Sam came out onto the porch, alerted by the shouting. David arrived minutes later, after an urgent call from Eleanor. The house that had started to regain its laughter, its calm, its sense of self, was once again besieged by fear. "This isn't a normal threat," David said. "This message didn't come from the prison, nor from the sources we've been tracking. It was sent from within the neighborhood. Someone very close." Eleanor closed her eyes. A name flashed in her mind like a whip. "Grace." Sam looked at her. "The neighbor? The one who looked after the kids when we went to Glasgow? The one who was there when Lily disappeared? The one who saw when David brought papers? The one who said she didn't like to meddle but knew everything?" David took out his phone. "Do you have a picture of her? A full name?" "Yes. Grace de la Tour." David typed. His face changed instantly. "That can't be." "What?" "That name doesn't exist in the neighborhood registry. The house is rented in the name of a man who died 8 years ago, and the landlord swears the tenant never provided official ID. So all this time," Chloe whispered, "she was watching us from inside." David organized a discreet raid with 2 unmarked patrol cars. They entered Grace's house without breaking anything. It was empty. Clean. Too clean. No clothes, no personal effects, no photos. Just a table with an unlit candle and an open notebook. On the first page, a sentence, "There is nothing more painful than watching them survive without me." Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. "It's Isabella." David shook his head. "No. The handwriting is female, yes, but it's not Isabella's. We've already analyzed hers. This is new." Chloe leaned over the notebook. The pages were full of drawings of children, a house, people, animals. All signed by someone named Romy. Sam swallowed hard. "I know that name. Romy was the nickname used by Maritza, Julian's mother." Eleanor felt the ground would give way beneath her feet. "She's alive." "Yes. Isabella told me, indirectly. She told me that angry mothers are more dangerous than powerful fathers." David looked at him intently. "So this isn't just revenge. It's personal." That night, for the first time since he was born, Eleanor let Mason sleep in her room, next to her. The boy didn't understand why his bed was empty, but he didn't ask. He curled up in the blankets and hugged his mother. "Am I in danger?" he whispered. "No, my love. You are with me. And with Dad, too." Sam entered in silence. He sat on the edge of the bed. Mason smiled at him. "We are going to be okay." Sam caressed him with his gaze. "I promise." But when he left the room, his face changed. "I can't let this go on." "What are you going to do?" Eleanor asked. "I'm going to find Maritza. I know her. And if she's behind this, I have to face her. And what if it's a trap? Then let them catch me. But no one else is going to touch my children." The next morning, David got a call. A security camera had caught a woman leaving the front of Eleanor's gate at 4 in the morning. She was wearing a hood, but her face was partially visible. "We have a facial recognition match," the agent said on the other end. "It matches a file for a Maritza R. Santos." David hung up and ran to Eleanor's house. "There's no doubt. It's her. And where is she? David hesitated. Someone is protecting her. And we don't know who. He held up an envelope that had been found at the scene. Inside, just one word, handwritten in red ink. Chloe read it aloud. Guilt. And on the back of the paper, taped with black electrical tape, was a photo of Sam, with a red cross over his face. The photograph with the red cross remained on the table. No one had touched it since David left it there next to the note. Eleanor barely looked at it, but its impact throbbed inside her like a constant echo. Guilt. That word, written in a firm hand, wasn't just a threat. It was a verdict. Sam watched her from the kitchen. He didn't try to defend himself or explain. He just put the coffee on and waited. He knew that sooner or later, Eleanor would get up from her chair, look him in the eye, and ask him the question that had been burning on her lips since the night before. And it came. What else are you hiding? Sam placed his cup gently on the table. What are you talking about? About that photo. About that name. About what you signed. About everything you didn't say when you still had time. Sam approached slowly. There's nothing left to hide. Then look at me, Eleanor said. Look me in the eye and tell me you had nothing to do with Liam's disappearance 17 years ago. The silence was immediate. 1 second, 2, 3. And then Sam spoke. I didn't make him disappear. But I knew more than I told you. Eleanor took a step back. What did you know? I knew that Arthur was being paid to get him off the map. Not to kill him, but to exile him. That they were following him. That they were going to frame him with a tax scandal if he didn't leave the country. And I let him go. Why? Because at that moment I was already in love with you. The slap was dry. Not from force, but from the pain that carried it. Chloe appeared in the doorway, having heard everything. She said nothing. She just stood there, watching her mother walk out of the kitchen like a shadow. David arrived at noon with a new file in his hand. He came in with a stormy face. We have a serious problem. What now? Someone has leaked the video of Sam with Arthur signing the contracts. It's on the networks. It's in the media. What does that imply? That if we don't act fast, they're coming to arrest him. Not with a warrant. With a patrol car and handcuffs. Sam took a deep breath. He didn't deny it, didn't defend himself. And if I turn myself in? If you go in alone, without clarifying the context, you'll just be another name on a list of scapegoats. But if you come with me to the prosecutor's office and testify with the documents we've already obtained, you can turn this around. And what do I gain? Nothing. But at least you don't lose everything. That afternoon, Sam sat with all the children. Lily cried from the first minute. Leo didn't understand. Mason just asked if Sam would sleep at home that night. Julian, from his corner, watched with eyes that were much older than his age. Chloe was the last to speak. And what if you don't come back? Sam caressed her face. Then at least I want you to know that I wasn't a coward. This time, I had the courage to face what I did. Hours later, at the prosecutor's office, Sam gave his full testimony. He detailed every document, every signature, every meeting. He gave names, dates, places. He spoke of Arthur, of Isabella, of Maritza, and of himself. David recorded everything. The prosecutor listened in silence. At the end, he signed a document and said, "You won't be free today. But what you've done here has changed everything." At home, Eleanor sat the children down for dinner, but no one ate. That night, as she was trying to sleep, she heard a soft knock on the porch window. She got up, went downstairs, and went out with a lantern. In front of the fence, there was no one. Just an envelope. Inside, a folded piece of paper. One sentence. "The last word will not be yours, Eleanor. The last word will be mine." And at the bottom of the envelope, a key. The same key that had opened the warehouse where everything began. And now, it would open something else. The place where the final truth was waiting, next to a body that was never supposed to be buried. Dawn broke over Ashton, but it was no ordinary dawn. The streets seemed quieter, as if the very air knew that this day would not be like the others. Eleanor opened the door of her house and found a small cardboard box left by the postman. No sender, no stamp. Just her name handwritten. She took it to the dining room, placed it carefully on the table, and called David. Another threat. David arrived in 10 minutes with an agent in tow. They opened the box with gloves. Inside was only one thing, a key wrapped in a clean, white handkerchief, folded with precision, and a letter. David read it aloud. "This isn't the end. It's the final truth that has yet to be told. The door that opens with this key holds more than a secret. It holds justice. It holds peace. And it also holds the body that everyone said would never be found." Absolute silence. Eleanor lowered her eyes. Sam came and took her hand. "Do you know where it leads?" "Yes. To the old warehouse. Where it all began." Chloe, from the corner, watched them. She had changed. She was no longer the broken teenager who cried out for justice. She was a young, firm woman who had learned to live among broken truths and inherited silences. "I'm going to." The journey was long. Dust covered the car windows, and the road wound between dry fields. No one spoke. They all knew that what they were about to do would close something, but it would also open something else they didn't yet fully understand. The warehouse was intact, just as it was the last time. David inserted the key. The rusted door creaked as if in pain. Inside it was empty, at least at first glance. They advanced in silence, guided only by the agent's flashlights. At the back, behind a wooden panel, they found a sealed hatch. David forced it open, and there it was. A small underground space, a chamber half sealed with broken concrete, and inside, a metal box. They opened it slowly. Inside were the remains of a man, and next to him, an expired ID in the name of Liam O'Connell. Eleanor fell to her knees. She didn't sob. She just repeated in a small, broken voice, "They killed him. They killed him." David closed his eyes. "Yes. He never left here." Sam knelt beside her. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. I swear." She squeezed his hand with force. It was no longer about forgiveness. It was about everything coming to light. The following days were a whirlwind. The national press picked up the case. The network of corruption, which began with Arthur and ended with high-ranking officials, was exposed. Liam's body was officially identified, and his story was told in the media as an example of how the truth always finds a way out, even if decades pass. Isabella was called to testify from prison, but her words no longer had any value. She had lost control. Her chess game was over, and the final move hadn't been hers, but Eleanor's. Weeks later, on a sunny morning, the whole family was gathered in the small yard of the house. Sam was placing a new wooden bench under the lemon tree. Chloe swept the dry leaves. Lily was drawing. Leo was carving a toy for Mason. Julian was reading in silence, and Eleanor, sitting on the porch, was knitting. I don't knit out of habit or need, she thought. I knit because in every thread, I feel I'm putting back together what life wanted to break. Chloe approached her. Are you okay? Yes. Because I'm no longer afraid of the past coming back. Because now, I've faced it. My dear friend, thank you for making it this far. For staying until the end of this story. A story of falls, of loss, but also of redemption and truth. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, like this video, activate the notification bell, and write the word justice in the comments. It will be the sign that you were here with us until the final thread of this plot. And if this content moved you, you can leave a super thanks so we can continue telling stories like this, full of emotion, unexpected twists, and characters that make us reflect. Because in the end, we all carry something unsaid, and being heard is also a way of healing. We'll see you in the next story.